Chapter 337. Endless waves rose up in Ming Siyuan's heart. At this time, there was no longer any doubt in his previous guesses. It had to be known that Yuan Tiangong's soul-killing methods were something that even he had to carefully deal with. But Ning Qin, with his mere nascent soul cultivation, was able to break free in the blink of an eye and even cause a backlash, the reincarnation of a deva. He was absolutely the reincarnation of a deva. Otherwise, how could he possibly possess such a powerful soul? At this moment, revered Ming's heart burned with a fiery heat. If the reincarnation of a calamity immortal realm supreme elder could become a part of the great desolate lake, that would represent an indescribable lucky chance. In the future, the South Shine Nation and even the wider world would become their stage. Ming Siyuan's eyes fell on White Feng Feng, and he revealed an earnest look of anticipation. Young master, you must work harder and capture fellow Taoist Baoyu as soon as possible. The future of our great desolate lake will depend on you. As Ming Siyuan was lost in his thoughts, Qin Yu's back was already wet with a cold sweat. Just now, for the first time, he truly felt just how terrifying a Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elder was. He felt as if his soul had been grasped by an invisible strength. Without giving him any time to resist, it would forcefully break free from his body and then be crushed to pieces. Luckily, Qin Yu had a partner soul. At the critical moment, he managed to block it and win a breath of time for the little blue lamp to respond. Then, within his Dantian sea, a brilliant light erupted. It was like a star that suddenly lit up in the dark skies. That deep blue light seemed to cross through endless space and time, shining into Qin Yu's soul space. Then, the invisible strength that descended upon his soul melted away like snow under the scorching sun. But at this moment, Qin Yu felt his vision fall into darkness. He was isolated from the outside world, as if he had fallen into the coldest place in the world. That cold intent ignored his powerful mortal body and cultivation, directly piercing through all obstacles and descending upon his soul, as if it wanted to see through him. That's right, he clearly saw it. This was because Qin Yu could clearly feel that cold and indifferent gaze, as well as the undisguised annihilation and annihilation within that cold and indifferent gaze. All of this had come too suddenly and disappeared without warning. His field of vision was restored as if nothing had happened. But Qin Yu knew that it had really happened. And the reason for all of this was because the little blue lamp had erupted with light just now. To be able to give him such a terrifying feeling, like an ant facing a blue sea without the least bit of room to resist, and also targeted at the little blue lamp. This was the will of the world. Only the will of the world could accomplish this. A single gaze was enough to make him feel as if he was in a desperate situation. Qin Yu's heart was still shaking. He finally understood why the little blue lamp had fallen silent after entering the land of divinity and demons. The aura of the will of heaven and earth was much stronger than when it was in the desolate barren land. It was simply incomparable. Although the gaze of the world's will had already faded away, Qin Yu knew that a sharp saber hung above his head, ready to cut down soon. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to survive the attack from the long saber. Qin Yu felt the gaze of the world's will. That annihilating aura caused him to freeze in place. Because his body was stiff to begin with, no one noticed anything strange. At this moment, because his face was stiff and expressionless, in the eyes of Yuan Tiangong, it was a performance of coldness and self-confidence. It was obvious that if Ning Qin didn't have absolute confidence in himself, how could he possibly maintain his current state? Moreover, what caused Yuan Tiangong's heart to tremble the most was that he had faintly felt an aura from Ning Qin's body that made his heart race. That aura seemed to belong to this part of the world. Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elders had an incomparably sharp sensing ability. Because of this, they could magnify any danger to infinity. Yuan Tiangong's eyes revealed shock and a deep dread. At the same time, there was also a burning heat that he couldn't suppress. The strength that Qin Yu displayed at this time had aroused his interest. If he could control Qin Yu and carefully investigate his secrets, there might be some unexpected harvests. As for whether or not he could suppress Qin Yu, Yuan Tiangang didn't doubt this at all. In the end, he was a Blue Sea Realm superpowerhouse. Even if Qin Yu was a bit mysterious, how could he possibly resist his strength? His eyes erupted with brilliance. Yuan Tiangang lifted his hand and grasped out. There was a loud, rumbling sound in the void, as if an invisible wall had locked down every inch of his body. There was nowhere to run. This imprisoning strength was inconceivably formidable. Qin Yu was expressionless, but alarm bells were ringing in his heart. If that person didn't take action soon, he would be miserable. And this take action wasn't referring to Ming Siyuan. With a cold snort, a figure suddenly appeared. He lifted a hand and pointed at the void. It was like a mountain that supported the heavens, toppling over and falling into a great lake, immediately stirring up great waves that shattered the imprisoning strength. Qin Yu drew back again and again. His face paled and his eyes dimmed. This finger had shattered the suppressive force around him, but hadn't done much to protect him. Thus, even though the shockwave from their collision had caused his blood to tumble and he had suffered some injuries, this was Yun Elan's warning to him that he had done something to him. As he thought, to these old and experienced existences, his methods were still immature. They could see through his intentions in the blink of an eye. Qin Yu bitterly smiled inwardly, but he didn't regret his actions at all. He respectfully bowed. "Thank you, revered Yun, for helping me." Yun Elan glanced over at Yuan Tiangang. He lightly said, "Revered Yuan, Ning Qin is the champion of this competition. Don't you think your actions have gone too far?" These words were heavy. In particular, coming from Yun Elan's mouth, they represented the dissatisfaction of the entire South Shine Nation. And in fact, this was indeed the case. Yun Elan had already received a secret letter from the capital. That person was extremely interested in Ning Qin, so he naturally couldn't allow anything to happen to him. Objectively speaking, Yuan Tiangong's actions weren't excessive, but they had already touched Yun Elan's nerves. He absolutely wouldn't allow any unstable factors to appear at this critical moment and affect the subsequent arrangements. Yuan Tiangong's complexion darkened. From these words, he could feel a threat. In all his dealings with Yun Elan, this was the first time this had occurred. It could be seen that this South Shine Nation exalted was truly enraged. But it was also because of this that the meticulous Lord revered Yuan couldn't help but overthink things. His first thought was that Yun Elan had discovered the secret hidden on Ning Qin's body and was preparing to take it for himself. Originally, this was only a guess. But with Yun Elan's appearance, Yuan Tiangong's judgment was confirmed. He took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. "Revered Yun's words, I don't quite understand. Junior Ning Qin has been disrespectful to me. So can I not punish him? So what if he is the champion of the great competition? Can he compare to the dignity of a Blue Sea Realm supreme elder like you?" This reaction didn't seem like Yuan Tiangong's usual smooth and slick way of dealing with matters. He simply didn't leave any room for negotiation and directly confronted Yun Elan. The simple meaning was, although the South Shine Nation is called the South Shine Nation, my cleansing temple doesn't necessarily fear you. A gloomy expression appeared on Yun Elan's face. He originally didn't think too much about this, but Yuan Tiangong's unexpected response left him thinking about it. Was Cleansing Temple preparing to snatch away the pill furnace that the South Shine Nation still hadn't fully understood? As soon as he thought of this, Yun Elan's aura instantly rose. Cleansing Temple had good eyesight, but weren't they afraid that their teeth would fall out? A chill tumbled in his heart, but Yun Elan remained calm on the surface. He slowly said, "How does revered Yuan plan to deal with Ning Qin?" Yuan Tiangang lightly said, "I will take him away. Life or death is not a concern." Yun Elan shook his head. "No." With these two simple words, the entire space fell deathly silent. Time seemed to stretch out without end. Every breath of time seemed incomparably long. Space twisted and tiny distortions appeared in the air. Everything seemed calm, But beneath this calm surface was a great volcano waiting to erupt. Once it erupted, it would be enough to completely destroy everything in front of it. Ming Siyuan grabbed the still, unaware white Feng and pulled her behind him. His complexion darkened as he looked at the scene in front of him, his thoughts rapidly racing. Yuan Tiangang and Yunlin were confronting each other, their focused on Qinyu. When this scene fell into the eyes of revered Ming, who thought he already knew all the secrets, he had a completely different interpretation. Yuan Tiangang and Yun Ilan had sensed the secret of Deva reincarnation on Qinyu's body. This was the only way to explain why these two Blue Sea Realm Supreme Elders would tear apart all pretense of cordiality and confront each other head-on. The soul of a Deva, to any Blue Sea Realm, this was a great temptation. This was because it contained a chance to break into the Calamity Immortal Realm. For some unknown reason, the high-level cultivators of the Great Desolate Lake were well aware that the chances of obtaining the soul of a Deva were unimaginably low. Perhaps the Great Desolate Lake would have already begun to move. Returning to the main topic, with the judgment of his superiors, Ming Siyuan felt that he needed to make a decision. There is no longer any doubt that Ning Qin or Bao Yu was the reincarnation of a Deva. If he could sell them a favor today, then even if the Mist and him didn't end up together in the end, the Great Desolate Lake could still form good karma with this transcendent existence that would surely become a calamity immortal in the future. With his thoughts set, Ming Siyuan exerted strength in his hand. Before White Feng could resist, she was sent flying away. He stepped forwards like a mountain, falling into the invisible confrontation between Yuan Tiangang and Yunlin. The complexions of the two Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses changed. They coldly glared at him. Ming Siyuan lightly said, "My Great Desolate Lake has always distinguished gratitude and grudges clearly. Little friend Ning Qin has helped the young master, so he's a friend of my Great Desolate Lake. The reason I came here today is to invite him to the Great Desolate Lake as a guest." Disregarding whether or not this was a valid reason, at least his attitude was clear. Thus, Yuan Tiangong's pupils shrank, and Yunilan's heart was filled with anger. One of them was more and more determined to obtain Qinyu, and the other was angry that Cleansing Temple and the Great Desolate Lake had actually shown hostility towards the South Shy Nation at the same time. Qinyu originally only hoped to enrage Yuan Tiangang so that he would take action and disrupt the situation, seeking a few variables. But, as the initiator of all this, he never expected that the situation would develop to this step. The air seemed to freeze over, and there was no longer any sound between the heavens and earth. The auras of the three Blue Sea Realm Masters were like invisible hands that thrust into the heavens, stirring up the winds and clouds. Thus thunder roared. Thus strong winds raged. The horizon turned pitch black, as if eternal night had arrived. Chapter 338. A peak nascent soul had the strength of 1,000 horses. 1,000 horses were equal to a flood dragon. The strongest divine soul had the strength of 1,000 flood dragons. 1,000 flood dragons were equal to a single dragon. As for the higher boundary, the Blue Sea Realm, they could at most possess the strength of 1,000 dragons. This was an ancient. Yun Ilan, Ming Siyuan, and Yuan Tiangang were all far from having the strength of an ancient. But as veteran Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses, the three of them had a combat strength of around 300 dragons. From this data, one could clearly understand just what the Blue Sea Realm was. Thus, even though Yun, Ming, and Yuan's three Blue Seas hadn't truly fought, just the collision of their auras was enough to cause a world phenomenon. The cultivators participating in the competition were all of the South Shine Nation's younger generation. Most of them only had a golden core or nascent soul cultivation. Within the range of this aura, they were as fragile as ants. It was already amazing that they hadn't fainted from fright. As for the few South Shine Nation officials, even if they had peak divine soul cultivations, they could only tremble beneath the might of a blue sea, not daring to approach at all. In this wilderness, the area that had been cleared fell into a deathly silence. Besides the sound of wind and thunder, there was no other sound. Everyone fell into a deep fear. They didn't know whether or not their fates would come to an abrupt end in the next moment. At this time, a wisp of light suddenly appeared. It tore apart the eternal night in the skies and sprinkled warmth onto the earth once more. That heavy pressure that left one unable to breathe began to rapidly recede like a tide. At this moment, countless cultivators felt as if they had been reborn. They gasped for breath, their expressions filled with excitement. They looked up and stared at the figure that appeared in the skies. There was no need to remind them. Everyone knew that it was this figure that had saved them from the brink of collapse and death. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a far too formidable strength surging around this figure. Space was distorted and blurry, making it impossible for anyone to see who it was. Chinyu never realized that breathing was such a blissful matter. His eyes fell on that blurry figure with gratitude. But in the next moment, this gratitude came to an abrupt halt. Yunalon took a step back. He restrained his aura and bowed. "Greetings, old ancestor." He was an exalted of the South Shine Nation and had a lofty status. For Yunalon to bow to him like this, it was naturally only the most exalted person in the South Shine Nation. Old ancestor, South Shine Nation's old ancestor. Yunalon had once mentioned the royal family's special envoy, and today, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor had arrived. If you said that there was no connection between the two, haha, who were you trying to fool? Chinyu discovered that he seemed to have underestimated the attention placed on him by the South Shine Nation officials. To others, this might be the result they yearned for even in their dreams. But Chinyu had the little blue lamp. Once he was discovered, he would die without a doubt. At this moment, in his anxious and restless mind, he suddenly remembered a lyric that he had inadvertently heard from a certain TV series. If time could be rewound, only a bastard would participate in this competition. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong's pupils shrank. They bowed at the same time. "We greet ancestor Huluan." In the South Shine Kingdom, Huluan was the surname of the country. Within the entire competition arena, countless cultivators could hear the voices of the three Blue Sea Realm super powerhouses. After a brief period of silence, the sounds of kowtowing filled the air like a tsunami. "Greetings, old ancestor." The sound waves surged into the sky. Just this point alone was enough to highlight the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's unsurpassed status and dignity. Beneath the skies, a blurry figure spoke up. "You may rise." His voice was gentle, like a clear spring that poured into the depths of one's heart. It shook one's spirits and caused them to feel even more awe. When they looked up once more, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor had already vanished from sight. For better or worse, the three of you are Blue Sea cultivators, and yet you can't maintain your composure. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by the juniors? The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled, as if he hadn't been angered by what happened just now. You could clearly see that the old ancestor had taken a step in the skies and then appeared in front of him. Although it was incomparably sudden, it gave off an extremely natural feeling, as if he should have been standing here to begin with. As if sensing Yu's gaze, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor turned his head. As he met those eyes that seemed to see through everything, Yu's heart shrank, and he quickly lowered his head. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor revealed a smile. He looked at Yu several more times before looking away. It was clear he was a bit interested in Yu. Yin Ilan bowed. "Old ancestor, it was I who didn't handle the situation properly. I asked the old ancestor to punish me." Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang revealed a bit of unnatural expression. They both opened their mouths to ask for forgiveness. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled and waved his hand. "Although I just arrived, I can roughly guess what the reason is. It should be because of this little friend." Yin Ilan nodded. "He is Ning Qin." The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled. "He is truly an outstanding young man. Not bad." His eyes fell onto Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang. "I believe that this competition was absolutely wonderful and many amazing juniors have emerged. If they aren't properly trained, then it would be too much of a pity. So, I sent a message to Exalted Yin to have him retain these juniors for a few days so that I can personally take a look at them before making a decision. After a pause, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled. I have decided to restart the refinement of the Revival Good Fortune pill. I asked revered Ming and revered Yuan to pass on this message. Although his words were polite, they weren't a discussion, but a one-sided announcement. From this, one could see just how strong the South Shine Nation's old ancestor was. Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangong's complexions changed. Revival Good Fortune pill. This was one of the South Shine Nation's greatest secrets. In the last several thousand years, it had only been opened a few times. Most of the cultivators that participated in this event were able to obtain amazing good fortune. Although this Revival Good Fortune pill was a bit strange, up until now, nothing seemed out of place. Those cultivators that obtained good fortune, unless they perished midway, all of them obtained considerable achievements. For instance, this Exalted Yinalan was someone that obtained a heaven-defying lucky chance from the Revival Good Fortune pill 1,700 years ago. Thus, he was able to become a Blue Sea Supreme Elder today. Ming Siyuan cupped his hands together. Old Ancestor Huluan, I must first report to my two masters before replying. Yuan Tiangang nodded. I also need to report to the Hall Master. Old Ancestor Huluan had already appeared. There was no need to discuss matters concerning Qin Yu any further. Moreover, it seemed that they had been wrong about this matter. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled. It's fine. I will give you 2 days to consider. 3 days from now, the top 10 of the great competition will all obtain an invitation to refine the Revival Good Fortune pill. He turned, his eyes warm. Ning Qin, I am quite optimistic about you. Don't disappoint me. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Just as he was about to say something, a look of fear suddenly gushed out from the depths of his eyes. After a tenth of a breath, he stood up and walked over to the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's side. He bowed and said, This junior will do his best. I will not disappoint the old ancestor. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor was startled. He immediately smiled and nodded. At this time, he only felt that this junior was quite bold. He never imagined that he would inexplicably fall into his trap. It's here. At this moment, the blood drained from Qin Yu's face. His soul shivered and screamed. The skies darkened without warning. This sort of darkness didn't seem like the world phenomenon caused by the battle between the 3 Blue Sea Supreme Elders. Rather, it was like some existence had opened its mouth and taken a bite, eating away at this complete space into nothingness. That's right, it was that kind of emptiness, a feeling of nothingness without anything at all. Just looking at it caused a chill to rise from the depths of one's heart. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's complexion changed. He fiercely looked up, his eyes locking onto that darkness, and his complexion paled. No one knew just how angry the old ancestor was at this time. He never imagined that the annihilation tribulation he sensed would suddenly arrive. And he hadn't sensed any of this beforehand. Has the world already made up its mind to erase this old man from existence? The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's eyes surged with madness. Within his decisiveness was unwillingness and anger. If they wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be so easy. That's right, the pitch-black darkness that suddenly appeared in the skies had been taken over by the South Shine Nation's old ancestor. It could only be said that this was an incomparably beautiful misunderstanding. From the start, the old ancestor never imagined that the pitch-black darkness in the skies was coming for this junior that was respectfully bowing in front of him. Without warning, a black light shot out from that pitch-black nothingness. This action seemed to exhaust all the strength of the nothingness. Thus, when the black light arrived, the nothingness trembled and collapsed, vanishing from sight. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor shouted out loud. An incomparably terrifying aura erupted from him, like 100,000 volcanoes erupting at once. It was hard to imagine just how his thin and weak body could contain such an astonishing strength. Qin Yu tensed up. He felt as if a building was toppling over. Fear gripped his heart like a giant hand. Without a doubt, if he were to be struck by this aura, he would instantly turn into a pile of broken bones and minced meat. Life or death hung on the line. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor frowned. He erupted with his aura, wrapping around Chinyu. This junior might still be useful, of course. If he couldn't cross today's great calamity, this junior would die an even more miserable death. It was unknown what the black light was. It passed through space without leaving behind a single trace, as if it were nothing more than a phantom. But the Southshine Nation's old ancestor's complexion became increasingly dignified. He could clearly feel the destructive strength contained within the black light. Break! With a thunderous roar, the old ancestor punched out his fist. Between the heavens and earth, there was a violent roar. The strength of this fist turned into a fierce black dragon in the blink of an eye, colliding with the black light. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor's fingers began to form lost seals within his sleeves. Once the situation turned bad, even if he was discovered, he would still go all out. But in the next moment, he furrowed his eyebrows. This was because in the moment they collided, he could feel the illusory nature of the black light. Its strength was far too weak. With this thing, it might be able to injure him, but wanting to erase him from existence was impossible. Pa! The black light disintegrated, turning into countless tiny particles of powder. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor's complexion changed. This was because he discovered that the powder didn't disappear. Rather, after passing through the might of his fist, it continued to roll towards him like black snow. It really wasn't as simple as it seemed. The old ancestor coldly sneered. In his long life, he had seen countless schemes and plots. So how could a mere trick like this be able to deceive him? But soon, the old ancestor's sneer turned to one of surprise. This was because he discovered that the target of this black snow wasn't him, but Ning Qin. Chapter 339. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor's heart shook. He thought of the possibility that he was being used, but this thought only flashed for a moment before it was erased from his mind. Today, the world's erasure was indeed weaker than he imagined, but to kill an ordinary Blue Sea realm was as easy as turning his hand. A mere nascent Soul Realm Junior, an ant-like existence, didn't have the qualifications to do so. So why would the world's erasure be directed at Chinyu? Like a beam of light, it split apart the fog that swirled in his mind. In that split second, the old ancestor thought of a possibility. His breath caught in his throat. Then it deepened. Raging anger ignited in his chest, igniting within him. The world's erasure couldn't deal with him, but it could destroy his hopes of continuing to live and thus indirectly achieve its goal. That's right, it had to be like this. The old ancestor had already learned everything about Chinyu from Yunalon. If it weren't for that mysterious furnace choosing to recognize him as its master, how could he have condescended to come here? Indeed, this Junior Ning Qin was the turning point for him to break through his shackles. And now, the world's erasure wanted to kill Ning Qin and destroy his hopes. Despicable. Shameless. Even the world was sinister and treacherous. If you have any methods, then come at me. But if you want to touch my turning point, don't even think about it. The Southshine Nation's old ancestor angrily roared out. He reached out a hand and slapped at the powder that fluttered towards him. His wide sleeves fluttered about. Every single ripple caused space to shatter and countless fine cracks to appear in it. With a furious strike, the old ancestor's cultivation erupted without any violence. As his palm fell, it was like a million mountains were collapsing. At this time, each and every one of these tiny grains of powder seemed as heavy as a mountain. The old ancestor stuffily coughed, and his complexion paled. Not only was this powder incomparably heavy, but it also contained a tyrannical strength that could destroy the soul. Even with his cultivation, he was barely able to withstand it. Was there really a need to do this to kill a mere nascent soul? It seemed that the world's will had expected him to stop it. But if he was careless for even a moment and was struck by even a single grain of powder, Ning Qin would be thoroughly killed. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor couldn't help but rejoice. Luckily, he had reacted quickly. Otherwise, it would have been too late for regret. Humph! Since the old ancestor had already discovered it, then no matter what methods you have, you can forget injuring Ning Qin in the slightest. All of the powder was forcefully destroyed by the South Shine Nation's old ancestor with his tyrannical strength, even if he had to suffer heavy injuries. Cough, cough. Coughing lightly, the old ancestor raised his head to look at where the black void had disappeared, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Damned heavens, you're still not good enough to fight me. The old ancestor lowered his head. His eyes became incomparably gentle, as if he were looking at the most precious treasure in the world. Ning Qin, I will leave first. 3 days from now, I will wait for you in the capital city. He turned, his voice as cold as the midwinter night wind. Yunlin, I admire Ning Qin very much. His safety cannot be compromised. These words were clearly not just directed at Yunlin. Cracks began to appear on the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's body. Then, the old ancestor began to disintegrate, turning into countless shimmering powder that vanished from sight in a breath of time. Ancestor's body, or ancestor. Ming of this, the ancestor of Yun. After standing up straight, he said with a solemn expression, Revered Ming, revered Yuan, you already understand what the old ancestor has said. Please make your preparations as soon as possible. Ming Siyuan took a deep breath and slowly said, Revered Ming, revered Yuan, you have already understood what the old ancestor has said. Please prepare as soon as possible. Ming Siyuan took a deep breath and slowly said, I will immediately report back. At the latest, there will be a result by tomorrow. He glanced at Qin, nodded, and left. Yuan Tiangang bid his farewells without expression. The old ancestor's words were clearly a warning to him that he couldn't move against Ning Qin for the time being. Moreover, what happened just now and the cultivation the old ancestor revealed just now had left endless waves in his heart. He had to immediately contact Cleansing Temple. Watching the two leave, a sharp light flashed deep in Yunlin's eyes. The revival good fortune pill was indeed suspected by all sides of the South Shine Nation, but the lucky chance and good fortune it represented couldn't be refused. The Great Desolate Lake and Cleansing Temple would definitely agree. Of this, Revered Cloud was fully confident. But at this time, he didn't feel any joy at all. He was aware of the old ancestor's condition. Everything should have been under his control, and he even had time to prepare. So why would a world-killing tribulation descend today without any warning? Had something happened to the old ancestor? Yunlin's complexion darkened. After a long time, he took a deep breath and looked at Qin. Ning Qin, I know you are restless in your heart, but I hope that something like today will be the last time. Qin cupped his hands together. But before he could speak, he was interrupted. I don't need your promises. I only look at your actions. I hope you won't disappoint me. After sending the preoccupied Yunlin away, Qin closed the door. All the pores on his body opened and massive amounts of sweat gushed out, soaking his robes. His hair stuck to his forehead, and he looked incomparably distressed. His feet felt soft, and he didn't even have the strength to take a step forward. Qin supported himself against the door and slowly sat down. Then, he let out a long breath and bitterly smiled. Just now, he really had taken a trip to the gates of hell. If it weren't for the old ancestor, his fate would have been miserable to the extreme. In the skies above, before that pitch-black void appeared, Qin had already received a warning from the little blue lamp. Before his thoughts raced, he instinctively responded and approached the old ancestor. This was because the old ancestor was the strongest person present. Only he might be able to resist the world's killing tribulation. Now that he was still alive and the old ancestor didn't even suspect anything, it could only be said that Qin didn't know what the reason was. But at this time, only a ghost would be in the mood to care about karma and cause. Living was the most important thing. After a long time, Qin felt his sore body gradually recover its strength. He didn't stand up. Instead, he straightened his legs and changed into a relatively comfortable position. Then, he leaned against the door, deep in thought. That black beam of light that descended just now was terrifyingly powerful. But through the little blue lamp, you could faintly feel that it wasn't a true killing move. Rather, it was more like a probe by the world's will. That's right, it was a probe. Through this attack, it wanted to determine just how strong Yu was and then formulate a true annihilation plan. Thinking of this, even though Yu had a firm will, his complexion darkened and he bitterly smiled inwardly. A single probe was already so terrifying. If a true annihilation were to descend, then perhaps all that was left for Yu was death. No wonder the little blue lamp had been so silent after entering the land of divinity and demons. It was because once it erupted with its true might, it would be locked onto by the world's will. Yu didn't have any complaints about this. Not to mention the fact that if the little blue lamp hadn't attacked, Yuan Tiangang would have been enough to make him suffer. The reason he had his current cultivation and was able to step into the land of divinity and demons was all thanks to the little blue lamp. Now, the only thing he needed to consider was how to survive the annihilation-level world-killing tribulation that was about to descend. Yu's eyes flashed. After a long time, he let out a long breath. At this time, perhaps this was the only way. South Shine Nation's old ancestor. That's right, it was this old monster that gave Yu an extremely bad premonition. Even so, he had saved his life. This old monster seemed to be very interested in him. Although he didn't know what this interest was, he didn't need to be a genius to know that it wasn't too wonderful. If this were any other time, Yu would definitely think of a way to escape and hide as far away as possible. But now, he decided to do the exact opposite. Not only would he no longer run away, but he would do everything possible to stay by the side of the South Shine Nation's old ancestor until he helped him cross the world-killing tribulation. Just yesterday, Yu had been distressed over how to escape. But today, he needed to think of a way to stay. Sure enough, the changes of the world were hard to predict. But in the end, this was all because he was weak. If he had the strength to resist the world-killing tribulation, then he would naturally be able to control his own destiny. My life is my own, not the heavens. To do this, it was more than just difficult. Yu took a deep breath. At this time, his heart began to vigorously beat in his chest. His conviction to become stronger became even firmer. He closed his eyes, his thoughts incomparably clear, as if they had been washed by a spring of clear water, becoming purer. He had witnessed the might of the blue sea, had withstood the world-killing tribulation, had experienced all sorts of ups and downs, and his emotions had tumbled in his heart. Unknowingly, Yu's state of mind had taken another step forward. A moment later, he opened his eyes. He felt that the current predicament in front of him was no longer urgent. Instead, what replaced it was a faint self-confidence. He would definitely be able to overcome this difficulty, go further, become stronger. Yu stood up and entered the training room. He took out pills and swallowed them, closing his eyes to refine them. Tiny streams could gather into rivers and seas. Grains of sand could pile up into mountains. There were no shortcuts in cultivation. Only by constantly working hard could one achieve oneself. Otherwise, no matter how many grand ambitions he had, they would all be nothing but empty words. It was unknown how Ming Siyuan and Yuan Tiangang communicated with the Great Desolate Lake and Cleansing Temple. On the second day, both sides expressed their willingness to allow their juniors to participate in the refining of the Revival Good Fortune pill. However, in order to ensure their safety, the two of them asked Yunilan to follow them to the capital city. After Yunilan asked for instructions and obtained a response, the matter was settled. As for the special envoy sent by the royal family, he arrived just as the sun was setting in the west. The rewards of the South Shine Nation's official alchemy competition were very generous. At the very least, the harvests obtained by the top 10 cultivators were enough to make even divine soul powerhouses jealous. For instance, Yu. He had placed all of his attention on the treasure furnace remnant spirit. But when he received the rewards from the royal family's special envoy, he was stunned to discover that the rewards were shockingly great. There was no need to mention the treasure furnace remnant spirit. In addition, there were also two incomparably precious treasures: the Heavenly Origin Soul Fruit and the Sealed Dimension Ring. The Heavenly Origin Soul Fruit was the size of a child's fist. It bloomed for 1,000 years, withered for 1,000 years, and bore fruit for 1,000 years. After hanging for 1,300 years, it would turn a pale gold color and be considered ripe. After a cultivator swallowed this fruit, it could greatly enhance the strength of their soul. Even in the land of divinity and demons, it was incomparably precious. It was a transcendent divine fruit that could only be found through a stroke of fate. The Sealed Dimension Ring was refined by cultivators and was called a spatial key. It was an extremely precious treasure. The land of divinity and demons was vast and boundless. Any one of the 7 great empires had trillions of territories. Generally speaking, it could be considered an incomparably massive space. In this space, there were many overlapping small spatial fragments. For instance, in a land of exiles, the place where the gold noble family lived was a spatial fragment. In the rumors, there were calamity immortals that could comprehend the great Tao of the heavens and earth and control a trillion rules. They could absorb spatial fragments and refine them into the boundless nothingness. What was nothingness? Perhaps not even calamity immortals knew. But its most powerful attribute was that it was unknown. A spatial fragment that was refined into nothingness was incomparably safe. Its only entrance was the communication tool left behind when it was refined. Chapter 340. Of course, one could simply regard the Sealed Dimension Ring as an enlarged version of a storage ring. But to use it like this, especially for an alchemist, was a great waste. After Qin Yu obtained the Sealed Dimension Ring, under the envious gazes of countless people, he directly recognized it as its master. After a drop of blood was absorbed by it, he could feel the endless distance, a tiny node in the nothingness. That was the spatial fragment that the Sealed Dimension Ring was connected to. After enduring the entire process of handing out rewards, Qin Yu didn't care at all. Because the royal family's special envoy announced that they would restart the refinement of the revival good fortune pill, it set off countless cries of alarm. The other cultivators around him also had excited looks on their faces. After the royal family's special envoy finished saying that he would leave for the capital city tomorrow, he turned and left without hesitation. He hurried back to his residence and closed the courtyard doors. Taking out the Sealed Dimension Ring, Qin Yu didn't hesitate to probe it with his divine sense. In his mind, there was a faint buzzing sound. Then, his thoughts became a bit more numb. Perhaps calling it numb wasn't the right word to describe it. It was like he was wrapped up in an invisible strength, making everything around him blurry and slow. Luckily, this feeling only lasted for an extremely short period of time. Then, Qin Yu discovered that his consciousness had appeared in a dim space. His eyes swept the surroundings. What entered his eyes was an extremely desolate world. The ground was shattered and covered in giant cracks that crisscrossed and cut apart everything. It was like an ugly giant spider web, as if it had experienced a calamity. In the distance, a mountain peak had shattered. Boulders tumbled down, smashing into the dried-up river at the foot of the mountain, nearly burying it. This spatial fragment was unexpectedly large. Unfortunately, it had clearly suffered irreparable damage. The heaven and earth spiritual strength in the air was so thin that it was nearly undetectable. If this was all, then such a large spatial fragment could be used purely as a storage magic tool. It would have an inestimable value. But the reality was that at the end of his line of sight, at the edge of this spatial fragment, the sky would occasionally twist. Space cracks would appear, disappearing and reappearing, repeating this process over and over again. Without a doubt, the constantly disappearing and reappearing space cracks indicated that the stability of this spatial fragment had been damaged. Moreover, as time passed, this collapse would become increasingly strong. Eventually, it would sweep through the entire space and completely destroy it, vanishing into nothingness. It was no wonder that the Southshine Nation would be so magnanimous and add this sealed dimension ring to the first place reward. Chinyu felt helpless and a bit of regret. His vision fell onto a dark red bead of blood in front of him. Although he didn't know why his blood would appear here when he completed the master recognition, he knew its true function the moment he saw it. His divine sense fused into his blood. Then, a faint layer of blood-red color rapidly expanded outwards, outlining his figure. Pa! As his feet landed on the ground, the pale blood-red Chinyu looked down at his hands and feet. He felt a deep awe towards the transcendent calamity, immortal realm existence that had refined the sealed dimension ring. To be able to alter the laws and directly use a drop of blood to condense a body similar to an avatar was already beyond the imagination of ordinary cultivators. Unfortunately, this spatial fragment would be destroyed within 3 to 5 years. Otherwise, if he could control this vast space, it would be of great help to his future cultivation. As this thought flashed through his mind, Chinyu's condensed figure's eyes widened in shock. In the next moment, the space in front of him rippled like water, gently shaking. Then, a thumb-sized lantern slowly but surely squeezed out from within. That's right, it was squeezed out, as if it were withstanding an unimaginable imprisonment. But all of this came to an abrupt end when it truly entered this barren and incomplete spatial fragment. It was as if everything about it had been completely cut off by the nothingness of the outside world, isolated and no longer sensed. Chinyu had seen the little blue lamp countless times, but he had never felt such an indescribable sense of relaxation from it like today. It was like a towering mountain had been removed from its head, no longer suppressing it. Thus, in the next moment, the little blue lamp truly released its strength without any scruples. An extremely dazzling, deep blue light erupted out like a broken dam. It was so bright and dazzling that tears began to flow from Chinyu's eyes. But Chinyu's instincts told him that he shouldn't close his eyes, otherwise he would miss out on something extremely important. Thus, as tears streamed down his face, he opened his eyes wide and witnessed a scene that could only be called a miracle. The little blue lamp that erupted with endless deep blue light slowly flew into the skies above his head. As it rose higher and higher, the pure, deep blue light gradually faded away. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple, 7 colors were separated out. Or, it was more accurate to say that these colors formed the deep blue light, dazzling and dazzling. The little blue lamp rose higher and higher, as if it would fly to the ends of space. The 7 colors began to fade, turning into a warm and transparent color. Like this, the little blue lamp that flew into the skies turned into a great sun that couldn't be looked at directly. It sprinkled down endless light, illuminating the earth. Chinyu was bathed in the warm sunlight. His eyes widened, filled with shock. He discovered that he had never truly understood the little blue lamp. It was actually able to produce such an astonishing change. A sun, through his connection with the little blue lamp. Chinyu could see through all appearances and find the core of the great sun where the little blue lamp was. But right now, its aura and the light and heat it released were no different from that of sun. Suddenly, Chinyu discovered that he had completely fused together with the earth beneath his feet. He closed his eyes and could feel every tiny crack in the distant broken mountain range, as well as a sickly and weak unknown grass deep within it. But at this time, Chinyu could clearly see that the withered leaves of this grass began to vigorously shake. In just several breaths of time, it was restored to a rich, verdant green, and exuberant vitality began to emit from its body. It seemed that with the arrival of the little blue lamp and the great sun that descended into this world, the grass had also been restored to its vitality. Chinyu could clearly feel the joy and excitement it exuded. And more importantly, it seemed as if he could control everything in this space with just a thought. After a moment of hesitation, Chinyu opened his eyes. He lifted a hand and grasped the air. Then, with a fluctuation in space, a complete green grass appeared. Even its inconceivably developed roots that were buried deep underground weren't damaged at all. This was because when Qin Yu sent out his will, the soil that buried the roots were directly repelled by an invisible strength, allowing the grass to regain its freedom. Qin Yu couldn't suppress the shock on his face. He gently touched the grass with his fingers and felt the rough friction. He knew that all of this wasn't an illusion. The verdant branches and leaves cheered as they twined around his hand, conveying their excitement, joy, and gratitude. After a long period of silence, Qin Yu let go of his hand. The grass vanished into thin air, returning to its original position where it was buried in the soil. There wasn't any difference from before. This was because his will was to restore the grass to its original state. Qin Yu didn't know why such an unbelievable scene had appeared in front of him, but he knew that it was related to the little blue lamp. This was because he could clearly feel that it wasn't he who had truly become the master of this world. Rather, it was the little blue lamp that had given him the strength to control everything. This was because the connection between Qin Yu and the little blue lamp had taken another step forward. Yes, when the little blue lamp fused into this space and gave Qin Yu the authority to control everything, they had truly fused together and could no longer be separated. In other words, it was only on this day that Qin Yu truly possessed the little blue lamp. His eyes swept over the shattered earth. Although it was still barren and messy, Qin Yu knew that it was no longer the same as before. It was on the verge of death, but it had become a rebirth. Within his dwelling, Qin Yu's eyelashes gently trembled and he slowly opened his eyes. He was still himself, and his aura hadn't changed at all. But his eyes were a bit more profound, and there was an invisible dignity to them. The reason for that was because he had become the ruler of a certain space. He had grasped supreme authority. This was an invisible change that had brought him. Qin Yu's original goal in participating in the Southshine Nation's youth alchemy competition was to obtain the treasure furnace's remnant spirit. But now, it seemed that his greatest harvest was this sealed dimension ring. Qin Yu's eyes fell, and the sealed dimension ring faded away. It didn't vanish, but became something that only he could see. This wasn't a function of the sealed dimension ring, but a power that Qin Yu naturally obtained after controlling that space. He took out the fleeting flame cauldron and handed the cauldron's remnant spirit to it. This palm-sized cauldron that was covered in rust suddenly erupted with boundless light. Bright lines appeared on its surface, and then it started burning. Within the flames, all of the impurities and filth that had accumulated on its surface were burned to nothingness, revealing its true form. This was a dazzling pill furnace fragment. Even though it was only a tiny part of it, one could still feel the formidable power contained within. Whoosh! The burning treasure furnace fragment flew into the fleeting flame furnace. Waves of heat instantly erupted, causing the surface of the fleeting flame furnace to turn crimson. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He discovered that at this time, he had an inexplicable intuition that the fleeting flame furnace would smoothly absorb the treasure furnace's remnant spirit. He didn't know why he thought this, but he was sure of it. Suppressing these thoughts, Qin Yu turned his head and looked at Ninth Province. Although it was silent, Qin Yu could actually feel a trace of sorrow coming from it. Inexplicably, Qin Yu seemed to be infected by it. His mood darkened with it. Then, after Ninth Province, he saw the figure of another pill furnace. It was a very, very large pill furnace, so large that the mountains, rivers, and even the endless ocean seemed incomparably small in front of it. It stood tall in the sea of stars, as if it were an indispensable part of the vast starry sky. However, this inconceivably large pill furnace was covered in cracks, as if it had been broken into countless pieces by an unbearable strength. A rich death energy lingered around it. This pill furnace was already dead. As this thought appeared in Qin Yu's mind, the scene in front of him suddenly trembled and then vanished from sight. Chapter 341. The machinery of a country could always erupt with unimaginably formidable energy. A temporary transmission array that connected the Marshall Field to the capital city was constructed overnight. After a rigorous test confirmed that there were no problems, the cultivator in charge of this matter respectfully reported back and received a great reward from the royal family's special envoy. Little friends, the transmission array has been prepared, and we will immediately arrive at the capital city. Because this is a newly opened transmission route, and because time is a bit tight, there might be some bumps during the transmission process. I ask that little friends be patient. Once we arrive at the capital city, it will naturally be more comfortable. The special envoy smiled. His chubby face was filled with warmth, making it easy for others to develop a favorable impression of him. Shua, Space Twisted, Yin Ilan, Ming Siyuan, and Yuan Tiangang, 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses, appeared at the same time. The Lord Envoy ran over, bowing and bowing. His manners were so thoughtful that it left one feeling a bit sick of him. Yin Ilan's eyes flashed with disgust, but he didn't say anything. He only lightly said, "Open the transmission array." He turned and gestured, "Revered Ming, revered Yuan, please. Exalted Yin, please." The 3 of them stepped into the transmission array. The special envoy didn't show any anger at being treated coldly. He still had a bright smile on his face as he arranged for the 13 young cultivators to enter the range of the array formation. Originally, there should only be 10 people with the qualifications to go to the capital city. But with a single night's buffer, there was room for many things to change. Thus, the number of spots was temporarily increased, turning into these 13 people. Hold on. Several cultivators ran over with anxious voices. The middle-aged cultivator in the lead had a pale complexion. He clenched his teeth and said, "We agree to Lord Envoy's request. Please allow my son to enter." Beside him, a young cultivator in blue robes was flushed red with excitement. The special envoy smiled. "Patriarch Nandong, I'm really sorry, but the spots have already been decided upon, and it isn't good to change them. If there is a need, perhaps next time." These words nearly caused the Nandong family to vomit blood. Next time, your sister. If they missed out on the chance to refine the revival good fortune pill, who knew how many years it would be before they could do so again? Patriarch Nandong took a deep breath and squeezed out a smile. "I ask Lord Envoy to bend the rules a little. We are willing to pay extra." The special envoy waved his hand, interrupting him. "The transmission array has been opened. I have other matters to attend to, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." He turned around and walked towards the teleportation portal. How could the juniors of the Nandong family endure this? As the good fortune in front of them flew out of their hands, they clenched their jaws and cursed. "Who do you think you are? You are nothing more than a—" He didn't manage to finish his sentence because the envoy turned around and looked at him indifferently. Ka. It was teeth chattering. Patriarch Nandong's complexion changed. "Special envoy, please show mercy," Yin Ilan said coldly. "Wu Shang, you dare to do such a disgusting thing and spoil my appetite. I won't forgive you." The envoy hurriedly withdrew his gaze and smiled humbly. "Of course, everything will be as you say." He quickly stepped into the transmission array as if nothing had happened just now. But in the instant that he stepped into the transmission array, the young man from the Nandong clan suddenly slumped to the ground. His body twitched, and thick and foul black blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. It was as if his organs had already rotted away. Patriarch Nandong's body shivered, but he didn't dare to say a single word. He turned and shouted out loud before hurrying away with his only son. Within the transmission array, the 13 young cultivators felt their hearts chill. They never imagined that this Lord's special envoy who smiled before speaking, who was like a gentle spring breeze, was actually such a ruthless and sharp character. Today, they had learned another lesson. It was true that they couldn't judge a book by its cover. In the future, they would have to be a bit more respectful and cautious in front of the Lord Special Envoy. A rich spiritual light shot into the skies. The space in front of them began to twist. In the next moment, the figures of the people within the transmission array vanished from sight. Although the Lord Special Envoy had already warned them, the shaking of the transmission array was still unbearable. After an unknown period of time, the dazzling colors in front of them suddenly vanished from sight. Qin Yu hurriedly took a deep breath and suppressed the tumbling in his chest. He didn't even have the mind to pay attention to the scenery around him. Ugh, among the 13 juniors, besides White Fong Fong, there was also a woman. After enduring for several moments, she finally couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned her head and vomited. As she vomited, everyone's patience was completely broken. For a time, filth flew everywhere and a sour and pungent smell billowed outwards. Qinyu originally wanted to hold on, but he didn't know what his companion called Wu Yuan had eaten this morning. The yellow liquid was simply unbearable. Thus, he turned his head and vomited along with everyone else, enjoying himself to his heart's content. The complexions of the 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses didn't change at all. They stepped out of the transmission array, allowing the juniors to throw their filth behind them. The Lord Special Envoy had a guilty expression. From time to time, he would walk over and gently pat this and that. He was truly competent to the extreme. Unfortunately, when they saw the Special Envoy's face, they couldn't help but recall the fate of the young Nandong family cultivator and the mucus that had gushed out from his 7 apertures. Thus, the Special Envoy helped the youths vomit even more heartily. After a long time, the youths that were causing the pollution finally stopped. They nervously walked out of the transmission array. Luckily, they were worried for nothing. Although there was an extremely high standard reception team outside the transmission array, it didn't have much to do with them. The South Shine Nation's capital was a place where all the elites of the nation gathered. But the arrival of 3 Blue Sea super powerhouses was enough to make them lower their noble heads. Revered Yun, Ming, and Yuan were respectfully invited onto a luxurious car that had been waiting for them for a long time. It could be foreseen that there would be a high-class banquet to entertain these 3 Blue Seas. Although the youths also had their own car, it was parked in a corner. It was a common-looking bus that could hold 20 people. The name bus was indeed a bit strange, but everyone in the entire land of divinity and demons called it this. So the South Shine Nation naturally followed suit. Although the interior of this bus was incomparably comfortable, the difference was far too great when compared to the treatment of the 3 Blue Seas. In particular, the cold expressions of the 3 officials within the bus caused the atmosphere inside to become even more depressing. The reason was simple. These 3 officials were all divine soul realm masters. The reason that proud children of heaven were called proud children of heaven was because they represented the hopes and achievements of the future. Of all of this, the word future was the key. Of the 10 proud children of heaven, at most 3 or 4 would be able to break into divine soul. And of these 3 or 4, those that could take a step further and reach the Blue Sea realm. According to a strict statistical probability, the chances of that happening were minuscule, almost negligible. Thus, when a divine soul cultivator faced these 13 outstanding talents of the South Shine Nation's official tournament, there was no need for them to look up to them. This was why the atmosphere was so depressing. However, there were always accidents. For instance, Qinyu was currently enjoying a completely different treatment from his 12 other companions. Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, please sit here. The official smiled. These 4 chairs were specially customized. We will arrive in a moment, so it will be more comfortable to sit here. Qinyu expressed his thanks and sat down beside the 3 divine soul cultivators. Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, how do you feel right now? I heard that the transmission just now was a bit too bumpy. Drink a bottle of ice plum juice and you'll feel a bit better. As he spoke, he took out a jade bottle. From the packaging, one could see that it was high class. After opening it, a light sweet and sour smell wafted out. Just a single breath made one feel much better. Gulp. It was unknown who gulped, but in this depressing atmosphere, it was particularly clear. Qinyu looked over. This little girl White Fengfeng's face was flushed red, but she tried her best to maintain her calm. She had an indifferent expression that said, "Why are you looking at me?" He smiled and passed over the plum juice. "You drink it, I feel fine." White Fengfeng had a grateful expression. She thought that Big Brother Baoyu really did care for her. She took the bottle and drank to her heart's content. As she glanced over the envious eyes of several people, she revealed a smug look. It seems I was negligent and forgot to give a bottle to Miss White. Fellow Taoist Ning Qin, you should also drink some. As he spoke, he took out another bottle. Unfortunately, no one else had share. This contempt was too obvious. Most of the young cultivators in the carriage came from extraordinary backgrounds. In particular, those that had grudges with Qin Yu and White Feng Feng found it hard to endure. For instance, that fellow classmate Zhao Jiuqian, who had been severely wounded and on the verge of death, had suddenly become full of energy overnight. There was a light cough. Although it wasn't heavy, it could still be heard. The official that took out 2 bottles of plum juice looked at him, but didn't say anything. But everyone soon learned that just because he didn't say anything didn't mean he didn't have any opinions in his heart. The bus stopped in the southeast direction of the capital city, in an area of exquisite and luxurious houses. 3 divine soul cultivators stepped out first. They lightly said, "You will be staying in the capital city for the time being. I will be assigning you your living quarters." Qin Yu's residence was naturally the best. It was near a small lake and was surrounded by lush trees. A light breeze carried with it a light moisture that made one feel refreshed. White Feng Feng was next to him. Although her position was a bit far back, it was still pretty good. Then there was Wen, who had vomited to the point of intoxication. Looking at his expression, he was also very satisfied with his own residence. Following that was a series of assignments. Black Bei, who had relied on his connections to obtain a spot, was also given an ordinary detached courtyard. Zhao Jiuqian couldn't hold himself back any longer. This was because even now, he still hadn't been assigned a place to live. But all the good courtyards within his line of sight already had an owner. Although it didn't matter where a cultivator lived, they still had to consider something like face. In particular, our classmate Zhao Jiuqian. His background was extraordinary, and although the competition was disrupted, the upper 5th grade child and Mother Inyang Pill was more than enough to be proud of. Cough. May I ask the 3 of you, where will I live? The plum juice official had a faint expression. Fellow Taoist Zhao Jiuqian, the courtyards here have already been arranged. I will have to trouble you to live across from us. Following his gaze, Zhao Jiuqian nearly fainted from anger. His complexion paled as if he had swallowed a giant fly. The youth sighed inwardly. This official was truly worthy of being a cultivator of the capital city. He didn't give Cleansing Temple any face at all. His actions were so overbearing. Chapter 342. Zhao Jiuqian was filled with anger, but he didn't dare to reveal it. This was because he could see from the eyes of the 3 divine soul cultivators that they were eager to try. It was clear that if he didn't know what was good for him and continued to cause trouble, the 3 of them would be very happy. Seeing Zhao Jiuqian admit defeat, the 3 divine soul cultivators didn't insist. They simply gave him a few simple instructions. After the torment of the transmission array, the youths were a bit dispirited. After learning that they would be notified of further arrangements, they bid their farewells and returned to their residences to rest. Qin Yu pushed open the door and entered. There were no maids in the small courtyard. He was satisfied with this. He casually walked around and didn't sense anything wrong, so he felt a bit more at ease. Thinking about it, if the dignified South Shy Nation had to use such despicable methods on juniors like them, then that would be looked down upon too much. However, out of caution, Qin Yu laid down an array formation and took out 9th province to isolate it from prying eyes. Then he began to swallow pills. However, the pills he refined had been used up during this period of time, and he didn't have much left. He would need to find some time to refine some more. As for materials, he had plenty in his storage ring, so there was no need to purchase them for now. The next day, Qin Yu didn't receive any notice from the South Shy Nation officials. Instead, an acquaintance arrived. Ani Hong. Qin Yu saw the person outside the door and the eyes peeking out from beneath her hood. His thoughts stirred and he moved to the side to let her in. Ani Hong swept her eyes around. Qin Yu knew what she was thinking. He smiled and said, "It's fine. It's safe here." "That's good." Ani Hong pulled off her hood and let out a long breath. She didn't slow down at all. "Mr. Qin, after you obtained first place in the competition, We wanted to contact you, but we were all refused by the South Shine Nation officials. It was only when we heard that the revival good fortune pill had been restarted that we felt relieved. This was an explanation for the inn's silence. Although Qin didn't care much about this, he still felt a bit better. Ani Hong, is there something you need from me today? Ani Hong observed Qin Yu's expression. Seeing that he wasn't dissatisfied, she relaxed and her expression became calm. I came to congratulate Mr. Qin for obtaining first place in the competition. The young master already knows of this matter. It's just that he has important matters to attend to and can't leave for the time being. So he asked me to give this to Mr. Qin as a congratulatory gift. As Ani Hong spoke, she carefully took out a wooden box. Qin Yu took it. This jade box was very light, and there wasn't anything strange about it. But after opening it, a dignified expression appeared on his face. After several breaths of silence, he said, "This gift is too precious." Ani Hong smiled. Young master said that this is what Mr. deserves. Then has already obtained a great harvest from you. Qin Yu thought for a moment and nodded. All right, then I ask Ani Hong to express my thanks for me. The young master was the true master of the inn, and his background was extremely mysterious. Since Ani Hong didn't say much, Qin Yu didn't ask too much. Ani Hong let out a sigh of relief. It's good that you accept it. I was afraid that Mr. Qin wouldn't want it. What a headache. Qin Yu couldn't help but shake his head. I can modestly decline this sort of treasure, but I still can't bear to let it go. Ani Hong was amused. That's good. I've already taken a risk by coming here, so I won't stay any longer. I hope that Mr. Qin can smoothly refine the revival good fortune pill. She bid her farewells and left. Before leaving, she gave Qin Yu a jade slip. Inside was information regarding the revival good fortune pill. This caused a smile to appear on Qin Yu's face. What he disliked the most were the unknowns of things. In this aspect, the inn had helped him a great deal. However, Qin Yu wasn't in a hurry to look at the information in the jade slip. Instead, he placed the wooden box in front of him once more. Inside, there was a branch as thick as a finger, green all over. It looked as if it had just been cut off from the tree this morning. The cut was still fresh, as if one could touch it with their hand, and it was slightly moist. But although this tree branch looked ordinary, it really wasn't ordinary at all. Qin Yu could clearly feel a massive amount of energy hidden within. Once this energy was activated, the protection it formed would be something that even an ordinary Blue Sea Realm Supermaster might not be able to break in a single strike. This was why Qin Yu said that it was far too precious. These words were the truth. However, Qin Yu didn't feel any unease as he accepted it. He had indeed helped in a great deal, and both sides could be considered to have gained something. After putting away this tree branch that could save his life in a critical moment, Qin Yu picked up the jade slip. After sensing that everything was normal, he probed it with his divine sense. A moment later, with a loud cracking sound, the jade slip disintegrated into powder that sprinkled down from his fingertips. Qin Yu opened his eyes, revealing a dignified expression. As he thought, the refinement of the revival good fortune pill wasn't ordinary at all. Around noon, the South Shine Nation officials arrived. Qin Yu pushed open the door and walked out. The other young cultivators that had been chosen had basically all arrived. The last one to arrive was Zhao Zhuqian. There was nothing he could do about it. This direct descendant of Cleansing Temple lived far away. The ones who came today weren't the 3 people that had escorted them yesterday. Instead, the one leading them was the Lord Special Envoy. Seeing his familiar smiling expression, even the dissatisfied Zhao Zhuqian felt his heart tighten. He quickly restrained his gloomy expression. I fear that little friends will be staying in the capital city for a period of time. Allow me to introduce myself so that we can all get along in the future. The Lord Special Envoy smiled. My surname is Qin, and my name is Wushang. I am temporarily the chief steward of the royal palace, commonly known as an errand boy. I have no specific duties and follow the will of the nation ruler. I will go wherever I need to. The 13 young cultivators all bowed once more. Chief Steward Qin smiled and waved his hand. Little friends, You are all proud sons of heaven, and your future achievements will be limitless. I don't dare to be arrogant. You and I will treat each other as equals." Of course, it was best to listen to these words. If they took them seriously, then they would truly be reckless. All right, the reason I came here today is to invite all of you to observe the good fortune tablet. It's getting late, so let's set off. The people weren't the people from yesterday, and the bus was still the same bus. Chin Yu chose a seat and nodded towards White Feng Feng before closing his eyes to meditate. His performance caused the hostile and provocative schoolmate Zhao Jiuqian to have nowhere to vent his resentment. He felt a great deal of suffocation in his chest. Luckily, schoolmate Zhao Jiuqian had a good ability to adjust himself. He thought that once he began refining the revival good fortune pill, he would thoroughly crush Chin Yu beneath his feet. Not only did he lose the competition, but the great desolate lake had taken advantage of his weakness. If it weren't for the fact that the South Shine Nation had restarted refining the revival good fortune pill, his fate wouldn't have been any better. Towards the Chin Yu who had caused all of this, it was reasonable for Zhao Jiuqian to hate him. The bus traveled in silence. An hour later, they arrived outside a heavily guarded square building. After stepping off the bus, there was a wide and straight road. However, this road was incomparably cold and deserted. Looking around, there wasn't even half a shadow. Chief Steward Chin personally appeared. Everything proceeded smoothly. After the guards verified their identities, they opened the incomparably heavy iron doors. Someone was already waiting inside. "Greetings, Lord Chief Steward." Wei Ziqing respectfully bowed. Although this Chief Steward Chin didn't have a good reputation, such as being greedy, ruthless, violent, and so on and so forth, he had been able to sit firmly in the position of the royal palace's chief steward for so many years. Just this point alone was enough to earn his respect. Chief Steward Chin warmly smiled. "Lord Wei, there is no need to be so polite. I was ordered to bring these 13 little friends here today. I will have to trouble you with the following matters." He turned and continued to say, "I will wait here for these little friends to come out. There is no need to worry about the first day. Just consider this a time to adapt." Wei Ziqing stood up. "Lord Chief Steward, please wait a moment. Once I have arranged everything, I will rush over to greet you. A few days ago, I obtained a new wild turtle. Knowing that Chief Steward Chin was coming, I slaughtered it last night and stewed it. It will be ready to eat later." Chief Steward Chin's eyes brightened. "Then I'll have to trouble Lord Wei." Both sides bid their farewells. Wei Ziqing and the 4 cultivators behind him led the 13 young cultivators deep into the 4-room building. As he spoke with the Lord Chief Steward, Lord Wei Ziqing appeared kind and amiable. But after he left, his aura was as cold as a stone. His entire body, from top to bottom, seemed to emit a cold and gloomy aura from every pore. As for the 4 people behind him, their complexions were deathly pale. They didn't say a word, as if they were corpses buried underground all year round. Their eyes were so cold that it caused one's heart to tremble. They passed through a long passage. Torches leapt on both sides, illuminating everyone's complexions and making them appear a bit gloomy and strange. This passage was very long. At the end was a large black door that seemed to be one with the surrounding thick black rock. With just a glance, one could feel its formidable defensive capabilities. Wei Ziqing took out a token. A beam of light fell from his head and swept over the token. With 2 light beeps, the black door quietly opened. However, this door seemed to contain some unimaginable strength. It caused space to distort, making it impossible to see what was inside. The good fortune tablet is inside. The 4 of them will stand guard here. After 12 hours, whether or not they have harvests, they must leave. As Wei Ziqing coldly spoke, he turned and left. His actions were straightforward and efficient. The 4 cultivators standing guard outside the black door were expressionless. The feeling they gave off was that they were 4 door gods with paralyzed faces. Although these 4 people hadn't released the least bit of a powerful aura, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. They were extremely dangerous. No one thought that they would be able to approach the good fortune tablet so easily. The South China Nation officials didn't send anyone to follow them. Were they not afraid that they would damage the tablet? Zhao Jiutian sneered. Stop dreaming. The Good Fortune Tablet is a rare treasure of the heavens and earth. Not even a Blue Sea Supreme Elder can damage it in the slightest. As he spoke, he stepped forwards and was the first to step through the door. The young cultivators were stunned. They thought that this was truly worthy of being a direct disciple of Cleansing Temple. He even knew these secrets. Just as they thought this, they cursed at how despicable he was. They quickly followed, as if they were afraid that if they fell behind, they wouldn't be able to refine the revival good fortune pill. Qin Yu wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he looked around. In this short period of time, the only ones left outside were him, White Feng Feng, and Black Bei Bei. The four guards were expressionless and didn't seem to have any intention of rushing them. It was like their duty was to act as a human alarm clock that would remind everyone to leave after 12 hours. White Feng Feng blinked. Ning Qin, fellow Taoist, is there something wrong? Qin Yu's eyes flashed with embarrassment. How could he have seen anything wrong? He had only subconsciously wanted to delay for some time. He shook his head and said, It's nothing. Let's go in. As he spoke, he led the way through the door. Although there was only a single step between the inside and outside, it was like two completely different worlds. A dark golden light sprinkled down. It wasn't dazzling, but rather quiet and restrained. As one bathed in it, they could clearly feel the rich aura of endless years. This should be a naturally formed cave. Above them, there were all sorts of strangely shaped rocks that had been corroded. Beneath this golden light, they seemed to be plated with a mysterious hue, and the source of this dark golden light came from the center of the cave. There was a stone tablet that stood on the ground. The stone tablet was over 10 feet high and wasn't too large. But as long as anyone saw it, they would feel that it was terrifyingly high, as if it stood there supporting the world. Chapter 343. Regarding this stone tablet, the jade slip that the inn had given him contained some groundless legends. But since they had been passed down, there was at least some truth to them. The general idea was as follows. 100,000 years ago, the vault of heaven suddenly collapsed, and a great stone tablet descended from the void. After a fierce struggle, it was obtained by the Huluan clan. Then, after 10,000 years, the influence of the clan continued to grow. Finally, they established the South China Nation, continuing on for dozens of generations without perishing. Finally, they became a royal bloodline with a deep background in the land of divinity and demons. The Great Stone Tablet here referred to the Good Fortune Tablet. There were many other theories, but in summary, the general meaning was the same. The Huluan clan's prosperity was because they possessed this stone tablet. As for what the truth was, no one knew. But it was an indisputable fact that the Good Fortune Tablet possessed unimaginable might. It was just that the way this might was displayed was a bit different. Cultivators, and only those that didn't surpass 100 years of age, could face the stone tablet and perceive the mysterious pill recipe. The pill they refined was the Revival Good Fortune pill. This pill recipe existed within the soul, as if it were a gift from the will of the world. It was impossible to describe, nor could it be spoken of to others. Only the one perceiving it could control it. But there was one point that could be confirmed after countless tests of refining the Revival Good Fortune pill. That was that no cultivator could perceive a pill recipe that was different from the others. However, there was one point that was similar, and that was that to refine the Revival Good Fortune pill, one needed to consume the lifespan of the alchemist. Although something like lifespan was illusory, to a cultivator, it was something that they could sense. It was an important existence that no one could ignore. After all, in the end, all living beings had a spirit and cultivated in order to complete a transformation of their life. They wanted to become more perfect, more powerful, and at the same time, they could live longer. Objectively speaking, the latter was the most important factor. Thus, a pill that consumed one's lifespan, was incomparably strange and chilling. If it weren't for the fact that after refining the Revival Good Fortune pill, one could offer a sacrifice to the Good Fortune tablet and obtain rich feedback from it, no one would have any interest in this pill. That's right. In order to refine the Revival Good Fortune pill, one had to offer it as a sacrifice to the Good Fortune tablet. There were even some people that made extremely bold speculations about this. The Good Fortune tablet had a life of its own, a life form that they couldn't recognize. The reason it accepted the sacrifices was to absorb the lifespan of the cultivators that were sacrificed, allowing it to continue living. Thus, the Good Fortune tablet's gift was more like an exchange of some sort of trade. Chinyu originally didn't believe these rumors. This was because this was just a stone tablet. Even if it contained a tremendous amount of power, how could it possibly possess life? But at this time, as he stood here and truly saw the Good Fortune tablet, he discovered that his previous views had been wrong. There were no words on the surface of the Good Fortune tablet. There were only dark golden textures that wove together. They were like wild weeds, but they also seemed to contain the highest mysteries of the world. It emitted a dark golden light that was majestic and vast. Its majestic aura was hidden, as if the slightest tremble could cause the world to tremble. Mysterious and powerful. But at this time, Chinyu passed through the incomparably dazzling surface of the Good Fortune tablet and saw what was hidden within. This kind of thing was called old, weak, or rotten. That's right. This was what Chinyu felt when he saw the Good Fortune tablet. He was well aware that this was the inconceivable ability he had obtained after thoroughly fusing with the little blue lamp and becoming the ruler of that distant space. None of this was an illusion. At this time, everything that the Good Fortune tablet revealed was fake. Chinyu took a deep breath and suppressed the shaking in his heart. He maintained a calm expression. He discovered that after he saw through the Good Fortune tablet, he could faintly smell the nauseating smell of decay that it emitted. This smell was 10 times, 100 times richer than a corpse that had been buried underground for dozens of days. But besides him, Zhao Jiuqian, White Feng Feng, and the others seemed to be enjoying the feeling of approaching the Good Fortune tablet. They took deep breaths, as if they could absorb the most wonderful energy in the world. At this time, Qin Yu's heart chilled. He faintly understood why Wei Ziqing would turn around and leave without hesitation, and also why he told them that they could only stay for 12 hours at most. Perhaps in a relatively safe situation, this was the limit of what they could withstand. The rotten smell that lingered in his nose became increasingly heavy. Even if he held his breath, he still couldn't stop it from invading his senses. Qin could only shift his attention elsewhere. He no longer looked at the Good Fortune tablet itself, but focused on its surface. As he looked at the dark golden textures, the rotten smell began to dissipate. At this time, the youths that entered the cave, besides Qin, had all arrived near the Good Fortune tablet. They sat down cross-legged, suppressing the excitement in their hearts. With the mentality of a pilgrimage, they began to carefully perceive the dark golden textures on the surface of the Good Fortune tablet. This was because countless cultivators that had obtained good fortune from the Good Fortune tablet had clearly said that these textures were the only way to obtain an alchemy room. Zhao Jiuqian sat down cross-legged, doing his best to calm the shock and excitement in his heart. Just by sitting near the Good Fortune tablet and bathing in the dark golden light, his entire body felt warm. It was like his magic power and divine sense had become lively. Some of the shackles in his cultivation began to show signs of loosening. This was truly worthy of being the legendary supreme treasure of the South Shine Nation. Zhao Jiuqian's heart burned with an increasingly fiery heat. He had even greater expectations towards the Good Fortune tablet's gift. But the premise was that he had to perceive the pill recipe and smoothly refine the Revival Good Fortune pill. He swept his eyes around. The young cultivators from all over had already begun to perceive the Good Fortune tablet. Qin Yu's lonely figure was particularly conspicuous in the back. Seeing his silence, Zhao Jiuqian coldly sneered inwardly. Chinyu really was someone who had never seen the world before. After seeing the good fortune tablet, his mind had already been seized. With such a shrewd temperament, he still wanted to refine the revival good fortune pill. Dream on, Ning Qin. This time I will thoroughly trample you beneath my feet. I will return all the humiliation you gave me in double. Zhao Jiutian's eyes revealed a strong self-confidence. He glanced around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he flipped his hand and took out a pill. Indeed, perceiving the pill recipe of the revival good fortune pill mainly depended on the cultivator themselves. But there were some necessary supplementary conditions that could increase the chances of success. This pill was personally given to him by revered Cloud the Night before he left. He clearly stated that it would be of great help to him when perceiving the good fortune tablet. With revered Yuan status, he wouldn't speak without thinking. Thus, Zhao Jiuqian had great expectations for this pill. Opening his mouth and swallowing it, Zhao Jiuqian's eyes widened. This was because he discovered that the good fortune tablet in front of him had become incomparably clear. Those dark golden textures seemed to be engraved into his eyes, and he could clearly see where they extended and twisted. Between his consciousness, there was a faint, hazy feeling, as if there was a bit more mist. Then, the dark golden textures in front of him began to slowly twist, as if they wanted to outline some sort of mark. Zhao Jiuqian was ecstatic. He had heard of the scene before. Without a doubt, this was the sign that the pill recipe was about to appear. As he thought, the pill that revered Yuan had given him contained an inconceivable strength. He, Zhao Jiuqian, would become the first person to perceive the pill recipe. His eyes swept around, looking at all the people that were painstakingly perceiving the pill recipe. His heart was filled with pride. None of them had even seen the door, but he had already stepped into it. This time, he would let everyone know that he was the strongest alchemist of the South Shine Nation's younger generation. As his heart was filled with lofty sentiments, Zhao Jiutian suddenly discovered that there was a pair of eyes staring at him, filled with shock. It was Ning Qin. This attention just happened to satisfy the regret in Zhao Jiutian's heart. Moreover, he was seen by the person he hated the most, Ning Qin. Without a doubt, he was even happier. Ha ha! Ning Qin, do you see? I, Zhao Jiutian, have already walked ahead of you. Satisfied, he left behind a cold and mocking gaze. Then, he looked away and began to fully focus on perceiving. Every second seemed to bring him great harvests. His face gradually flushed red with endless excitement. Indeed, Qinyu was looking at classmate Zhao with shock. At this time, classmate Zhao's body was trembling slightly, as if he were intoxicated. Just now, he had inadvertently seen Zhao Jiutian swallow a pill. Just as he was wondering what he was doing, he saw what happened next. The rotting stench that filled the entire cave, as well as the thick aura of decay that made it hard to breathe, seemed to be pulled by an invisible strength. After a brief period of silence, it began to gather without warning, forming a nearly pitch-black fog that covered Zhao Jiutian. Every time he took a breath, he would breathe in endless rotting and decaying aura. Even the pores on his body were cheering as they opened and breathed in and out. His face revealed an expression of incomparable enjoyment and intoxication. His eyebrows were filled with joy and excitement, as if he had obtained a tremendous harvest as he breathed in and out. Qin Yu's chest tumbled. Luckily, he had experience with the transmission array and was able to barely suppress the urge to vomit. He quickly looked away, not daring to look again. But in his heart, he vaguely realized something. The cultivator sitting in front of the good fortune tablet should be absorbing this rotting and decaying aura in order to obtain the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill. He glanced at the dazed and excited white Feng Feng. Qin Yu had an impulse to remind her, but in the end he remained silent. He couldn't take any risks. The slightest bit of carelessness could cause irreparable consequences. Moreover, since he had set a 12-hour limit, that meant she wouldn't suffer any irreparable harm. Qin Yu apologized inwardly. Then, he sat down cross-legged and put on a solemn and excited appearance. Then, he began to daydream. Yes, Qin Yu was only earnestly daydreaming. After seeing through the essence of the revival good fortune pill, it was naturally impossible for him to refine it on his own initiative, even though this would bring him rich rewards. This was because he had no way of knowing what would happen if he refined the revival good fortune pill and sacrificed it to this increasingly strange and sinister good fortune tablet. What Qin Yu was considering right now was to delay for some time. It would be best if he didn't refine the revival good fortune pill until the world-killing tribulation arrived, but this wasn't too realistic. After all, only by approaching the Southshine Nation's old ancestor could he survive the world-killing tribulation. If he didn't refine the revival good fortune pill, he wouldn't be able to obtain the attention of the Southshine Nation's old ancestor, and he wouldn't be able to approach him. This was an unsolvable problem. Qin Yu suppressed this problem that gave him a headache. He thought to himself that he would delay for as long as he could. Chapter 344. 12 hours couldn't be said to be long, but it wasn't short either. After being in a daze for too long, one would inevitably feel bored. Cultivating was certainly the best choice to pass the time, but cultivating here wasn't a good choice at all. Qin Yu's eyes couldn't help but fall onto the surface of the stone tablet, onto the dark golden lines that wove together. At first, he only wanted to pass the time. After all, these lines themselves were very beautiful. But after an unknown period of time, his entire mind was immersed within them. It was like in the entire world, there was nothing else left but him and these dark golden lines. In this trance-like state, even the good fortune tablet itself was ignored. Only these beautiful lines became increasingly clear, as if they were branded into his mind, impossible to erase. The dark golden lines in front of him began to twist. In Qin Yu's eyes, they turned into countless meridian-like existences, with unknown substances flowing within. However, most of these dark golden lines were already blocked and withered. There were many spots on them, and they were no longer able to smoothly flow through. When Qin Yu's attention focused on one of the blocked dark golden lines, he seemed to hear a pained gasp in his ears. He could feel the longing coming from it. As this longing poured into his mind, it transformed into information that only Qin Yu could sense. A throbbing feeling gushed out from deep within his heart. Qin Yu was startled awake, his eyes filled with shock. This is a pill recipe. At almost the same time, deep within the Southshine Nation's royal palace, on an altar deep underground, 9 oil lamps were placed in a circle. The flickering dark green flames faintly illuminated a figure sitting cross-legged within, a figure that resembled a skeleton. Suddenly, this figure's eyes opened. Like 2 bolts of lightning, they instantly tore through the darkness. On the first day, someone had managed to perceive the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill. This was an unprecedented matter. Could that junior Ningqin really be the turning point for this person to change his destiny and obtain a new life? The skeletal figure lifted a hand and pointed at the void. That thin and withered finger seemed as if it would break at the slightest bit of force. But at this time, an incomparably formidable strength gushed out from his fingertip. This strength pierced through the void, crossing a great distance and falling on the edge of the capital city, in a heavily guarded square building. In a certain grand hall, a large bell that was covered in a thick layer of dust began to ring without any warning. The deep and penetrating sound instantly resounded in all directions. Chief Steward Qin, who was sitting across from him, eating and drinking to his heart's content, suddenly looked up. His eyes flashed, and he shouted, "Lord Wei." Wei Ziqing had already stood up. The drunkenness on his face had completely disappeared. He stood up and said, "Chief Steward, please wait a moment. I will go immediately." She turned to leave, but Qin Wushang couldn't wait any longer. After a moment of hesitation, he strode after her. "Ha, I found it. Pill formula. This is a pill formula." Zhao Jiuqian threw his head back and laughed heartily. His excited voice reverberated ceaselessly, jolting everyone back to their senses and causing them to reveal expressions of bewilderment. The first thought that popped into the minds of the youths was that this was impossible. In a short day, he had only managed to adapt to the good fortune tablet's aura. So how could he possibly perceive the pill recipe? However, what happened next completely shattered their hopes of getting lucky. The black door quietly opened and Wei Ziqing strode in. Following behind him was a joyful chief, Steward Qin, who comprehended the pill recipe. Zhao Jiutian stood up and bowed. Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin, it is this junior. A warm smile bloomed on Wei Ziqing's face. So his little friend, Zhao Jiutian. You are truly a proud son of heaven, he praised. Chief Steward Qin frowned inwardly. He swept his eyes over Qin Yu, who seemed to be at a loss for what to do. He was surprised that it wasn't him. However, even if it wasn't him, it was still a good thing that someone had successfully perceived the pill recipe on the first day. Little friend Zhao Jiutian is truly worthy of being a direct descendant of Cleansing Temple. To be able to perceive the pill recipe on the first day, this is the first time this has happened since the Revival Good Fortune pill has been refined. Chief Steward Qin turned and smiled. Lord Wei, I will have to trouble you to look after little friend Zhao. You must satisfy all of little friend Zhao's needs so that he can successfully refine the pill as soon as possible. Wei Ziqing laughed. Of course. Little friend Zhao, from today on, there is no need for you to rush back and forth. You can stay here, and if there is anything you need, feel free to ask. Zhao Jiutian was overjoyed. Thank you, Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin. He swept his eyes around. Although he tried his best to remain calm, the arrogance in his eyes was still clear. Wherever he looked, the young cultivators all lowered their heads. Although they didn't want to admit it, Zhao Jiutian's performance was far, far better than theirs. Finally, his eyes stopped on Qin Yu. After discovering his stunned expression, Zhao Jiutian felt even more carefree. Ning Qin, today is the day that I wash away my shame and become famous once more. The high-spirited Zhao Jiutian was led away by Wei Ziqing and Chief Steward Qin with a smile. It could be foreseen that he would receive the best reception. After this interruption, the young cultivators no longer had the mood to continue perceiving the good fortune tablet. Thus, today's session ended early and they were let out. The bus was silent, with no one in the mood to speak. Today, everyone had come together, but when they left, someone had already obtained the right to stay behind. They were all proud and arrogant youths. Although they had lowered their heads, they still weren't convinced in their hearts. They gathered their strength, and raging flames ignited in their hearts. White Feng was a bit puzzled. She looked at Qin Yu for a moment. His eyes were closed in meditation, and his expression hadn't changed at all from when he came. Didn't he feel a bit disappointed? She immediately thought that this was the attitude that her big brother Baoyu should have. So what if he fell behind for a while? There would always be a time when he would catch up. Hum. Her big brother Baoyu was truly the best. But how could this little girl know that her big brother Baoyu wasn't just disappointed? He was overjoyed. He almost wanted to shout out 3 times. Classmate Zhao Jiutian was a good person, a very good person. If it weren't for him also perceiving the pill recipe, Qin Yu feared he would have been in a dire situation. In fact, he might even be forced to start refining the Revival Good Fortune pill. Moreover, most importantly, once he began refining the pill, no matter how much he didn't want to succeed, he wouldn't dare to play any tricks during the refining process. This was because every time the Revival Good Fortune pill failed, what was lost was the lifespan of the refiner. This was far too terrifying. So, if possible, Qin Yu really wanted to give his classmate, Zhao Jiutian, a giant plaque. Written on it, an unrivaled good man. The bus silently returned to their residence. After White Feng stepped off, she turned around and said, Ning Qin, you can definitely do it. You can do it. This little girl decided to give her big brother Baoyu some moral support. But she ignored the pressure that these words might bring. Everyone that was preparing to leave suddenly stopped, their eyes falling onto Qin Yu's body. As the first-ranked participant of the competition, and someone who was also highly regarded by the South Shine Nation officials, Zhao Jiuqian had actually taken the lead and was the first to perceive the revival good fortune pill recipe. The pressure he felt should be the greatest. Thinking of this, everyone felt the pressure in their chests loosen a little and their breathing became smoother. Humans were worldly beings, and they instinctively liked to compare themselves. When they discovered that someone was having a harder time than them, they would subconsciously feel relaxed. Oh, there's someone worse than me. White Feng Feng noticed the change in the atmosphere. She didn't like the way some people looked at her big brother Baoyu. But she didn't care about being angry. She only wanted to explain to her big brother Baoyu that she hadn't done it on purpose. But the more anxious she was, the more she didn't know what to say. Her face flushed red, and she was about to cry. Qin Yu smiled, comforting her with his eyes. You can do it too. His voice was calm and gentle, without the anger and shame that everyone imagined. Instead, there was a bit of indifference. This caused the young cultivators to be startled. Then, they felt a bit embarrassed and quickly lowered their heads to leave. This was because Qin Yu's current performance made them feel that their mental fortitude was far too poor. Without saying anything more, Qin Yu nodded and left. The next day, the bus arrived on time. Chief Steward Qin's smiling face appeared in front of everyone once more. Little friends, I obtained a pleasant surprise yesterday. I hope that you can continue to work hard today. He swept his smiling eyes over Qin Yu and nodded in greeting. Then, he took a seat at the front. In the square building, behind Wei Ziqing stood an imposing and dignified youth. This was Zhao Jiutian. His eyes swept over the people who had arrived, pausing on Qin Yu for a moment. His lips curved up in a smile. Chief Steward Qin smiled. Little friend Zhao, did you rest well last night? Zhao Jiutian respectfully bowed in return. The incense that Chief Steward Qin sent is indeed of the highest quality. After a dreamless night, I have fully recovered my spirit. This conversation caused the youths behind the chief steward to feel envy. Wei Ziqing smiled. Little friend Zhao has decided to observe for another day. After careful consideration, you can begin refining. Chief Steward Qin nodded. That should be the case. After all, refining the revival good fortune pill is not a trivial matter. His eyes were full of praise. Little friend Zhao is so cautious and isn't arrogant or rash. Is truly rare. I believe that you can refine the revival good fortune pill in the shortest time possible. Zhao Jiuqian cupped his hands together. This junior will do his best to not disappoint Chief Steward and Lord Wei. Wei Ziqing smiled. That's enough. I will send little friend Zhao in first. Chief Steward Qin, please wait here for a moment. We will continue to taste the remaining half a jar of old wine from yesterday. Yesterday, because Zhao Jiuqian was perceiving the pill recipe, Qin Wushang had already broken the rules by following him in. These words were a reminder. Chief Steward Qin smiled and nodded, as if he didn't notice anything. Good. Lord Wei, please return quickly. If you're late and I finish drinking the wine, then don't blame me. Wei Ziqing laughed and left. After passing through the passageway, the black door appeared in sight. Wei Ziqing whispered several more words to Zhao Jiutian and patted his shoulder. Then, he opened the door and left. Zhao Jiutian straightened himself. He didn't bother to hide his eyes as he coldly looked at him. Ning Qin, you need to hurry up. Don't fall too far behind me, otherwise it will be too boring. Ridicule, disdain, and a lofty attitude mixed in with it. It was more than just overbearing to describe it. Moreover, after the schoolmate Zhao finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and walked back into the cave, not caring at all about how Qin Yu responded. He was truly arrogant and carefree. Chapter 345. White Feng Feng angrily said, "What's so great about it? Isn't it just luck that you were a step faster? It's still unknown who will refine the revival good fortune pill first." These words caused the young cultivators to be excited. Although they didn't dare to say it so bluntly, they all had this thought in their hearts. They didn't bother with taunting Ning Qin anymore and strode into the cave. Yu smiled at White Fong Fong and stepped into the cave. What was different from what everyone imagined was that after he luckily escaped yesterday, he had already made a decision that he wouldn't meditate on the good fortune tablet's dark golden runes for the next several days. However, he didn't plan on wasting these 12 hours. He closed his eyes as if he were fully immersed in meditation, but his divine sense quietly fused into the sealed dimension ring on his hand. A familiar feeling of divine sense wrapping around him, and Yu's divine sense appeared in the distant spatial fragment. His divine sense fused into the blood in front of him, forming a divine sense body. Yu took a deep breath, and an unprecedented feeling of relaxation emerged from deep within his heart, because this was a world that belonged to him. In the distant horizon, at the end of the spatial fragment, those space cracks still existed, but the frequency at which they appeared had decreased by a great deal. The earth in front of him was still in a messy state, but you could keenly sense that it was in the process of recovering. Those terrifying abyss-like cracks were shrinking, but the extent was too small. If it weren't for this space being in Yu's perception, he wouldn't have noticed this at all. Faint traces of weak spiritual strength drilled out from the earth, fusing into the air. Although it was still incomparably thin, this was an obvious improvement. Perhaps as time passed, this space would be restored to its original appearance in the future, and it might even become more stable and formidable. This was because it was no longer the original. With the support of the little blue lamp, any miracle was possible. His thoughts stirred. Yu reached out his hand and grasped the air. A blade of green grass appeared in front of him. This was the only life left in this space. After the spatial fragment was reborn, it began to display its formidable survival abilities. The extremely thin spiritual strength in the air was slowly swallowed into its body. Perhaps it was because its previous life had been far too difficult, but even this weak spiritual strength was enough to allow it to live well. Compared to when it first appeared, its branches and leaves were a full circle larger. Although it was only a stalk of grass, the fact that it could become the only living creature in this spatial fragment after the catastrophe was enough to prove that it was extraordinary. If it was brought out of this spatial fragment and came into contact with the extremely rich heaven and earth spiritual strength of the land of divinity and demons, it would likely grow in a short period of time and reveal its true terror. As this thought flashed through his mind, he discovered that the green grass in his hand began to gently shiver, as if a great fear were born within it. His eyes flickered as he slowly said, "You don't want to leave this place?" The tender green leaves of the grass swayed, even though there was no wind. It was obvious that they were nodding. Yu was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. "Good. Since you don't want to leave, then you can stay here." He let go, and the grass disappeared, returning to the place where it grew. With a step forwards, invisible steps seemed to appear in the void, supporting his figure and allowing him to step into the skies. Strong winds howled high in the skies, but they didn't even touch the hem of Yu's clothes. When they were 100 feet away, the winds parted on their own and then reformed another 100 feet away. Looking down at this spatial fragment that was 100 miles wide, Yu's eyes flashed. He lifted a hand and gently stroked it. In the distance, the earth began to rumble and shake. Countless pieces of earth and rocks were pushed forward by an invisible strength, tumbling into the distance. This wave appeared out of nowhere. Wherever it passed, it erased all traces, causing the earth to become flat once more. At the base of the mountain, the crushed stones that nearly buried the river began to fly away, piling up on the riverbank and raising the river. The slightly tilted mountain peak emitted a deep, rumbling sound. Then, as if it were being lifted up by the hands of a demon god, it slowly straightened up until it stood tall on the earth. The speed at which space repaired itself was far too slow. Since Yu possessed the strength to control this space, he could naturally speed up this process. Unfortunately, all he could do was repair the surface. The stability of the spatial fragment, the lack of spiritual strength, the withering of life, all of this required a long time to truly restore itself. At this time, Qin Yu seemed to have become the incarnation of the legendary divine god that created the heavens and earth. Wherever he looked, everything would change according to his will. Flattening the earth, rebuilding the river, straightening the mountains, all of these miraculous scenes left Qin Yu's heart filled with excitement. But as time passed, this excitement would eventually fade away. Thus, a trace of curiosity began to appear. Qin Yu wanted to know, why did he possess this strength that allowed him to control everything? Of course, he knew that this was a right bestowed upon him by the little blue lamp. But why? Or, to be more precise, what did the little blue lamp give him that allowed him to accomplish this? Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. He transmitted his questions to the spatial fragment. Then, in the world around him, countless blurry phantoms appeared. These phantoms were mostly broken. Some were even cut off at the waist, appearing in an incomparably broken state. Even so, with just a single glance, Qin Yu could feel an incomparably formidable strength contained within these broken phantoms. This was a strength that seemed to contain all things, a strength that could cover all. It was irresistible. Suddenly, these phantoms trembled for a moment before vanishing. Qin Yu was enlightened. The current spatial fragment wasn't strong enough to support their true appearance. He looked up at the sun that emitted endless light and heat. After a moment of silence, just as Qin Yu thought he wouldn't receive a response, the little blue lamp emitted a clear fluctuation. Rules! These two words entered his mind, setting off thunderous, rumbling waves. Qin Yu's pupils shrank. He finally understood what those blurry phantoms he saw just now were. Rules. They were actually rules. This far surpassed Qin Yu's expectations. In his initial understanding, something like rules was something that could only be sensed and understood. It was a mysterious and mystical existence. After all, when a cultivator stepped into divine soul, they had to open their soul space and strengthen their soul. Only then would they have the qualifications to sense the existence of rules. He never imagined that they could also be seen with the naked eye. He even had an intuition that he could touch the rules with his hand. The little blue lamp wouldn't lie. Then, it was clear that what Qin Yu saw now was the true form of the rules. However, this required a cultivator's cultivation to reach an extremely formidable boundary in order to have the qualifications to touch them. The current Qin Yu was far from having the qualifications to do so. But the existence of the little blue lamp allowed him to grasp this strength in this spatial fragment ahead of time. The countless blurry phantoms that flooded the world appeared in front of his eyes. Deep in Qin Yu's heart, he felt his heart race. This racing wasn't fear, but an intense excitement. He felt as if he had overlooked something, and to him, this was something that would play an incomparably important role. What was it? Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows in deep thought. His mind was in chaos. As he furrowed his eyebrows in pain, it was like a bolt of lightning flashed through the fog, directly striking his soul. A feeling of enlightenment filled him as he finally realized what it was. When a cultivator started from energy training and rose all the way to nascent soul, their lifespan would increase and their strength would become formidable. But all of this could be seen as a cultivator tempering themselves. But from the divine soul realm onwards, the soul space would open. This was the same as a cultivator having the qualifications to peep into the world. Using the soul to comprehend the rules, merging one's body with heaven and earth, forming a connection and stepping into a new world of cultivation. At this stage, the most important thing for a cultivator was to comprehend the rules, sense them, borrow them, and control them to obtain unparalleled power. As for the rules, they were omnipresent yet untouchable. They were hidden between the heavens and the earth, and could only be comprehended bit by cultivators. The speed was slow, and the requirements were extremely high. It required a cultivator to experience the vicissitudes of time, experience the vicissitudes of life, understand the world, have a tenacious soul, and possess a formidable will. Thus, the threshold for nascent soul to enter divine soul was enough to block 90% of cultivators. As for divine soul, taking another step further into blue sea, that was enough to block 99% of cultivators. As for higher realms, the number was so small that it was impossible to calculate with probability. One could only say that one had a heaven-defying talent and also had a monstrous lucky chance. But today, Qin Yu seemed to have discovered a cultivation shortcut. Although he hadn't verified it yet, even if there was only a 10% chance, it was still enough to leave him excited. This shortcut was the spatial fragment he was currently in. This was because it also possessed its own rules, and Qin Yu possessed the strength to control everything within this spatial fragment. No matter how complex or difficult it was to comprehend the rules, once they were clearly presented in front of him, he could control them. If this could really be done, then once Qin Yu stepped into the divine soul realm, his cultivation speed would be completely different from that of other cultivators. Not only would he not slow down, but he would grow at an even more astonishing speed. Of course, the premise was that this spatial fragment could truly condense its own rules and not be like it was now, a blurry and broken phantom. Originally, a pure spatial fragment didn't have a complete heaven and earth, so it was impossible for complete rules to exist. This was also the reason why the vast majority of spatial fragments had restrictions on cultivations. Because once a strength surpassed the limit it could withstand entered, it would cause the spatial fragment to collapse. But the existence of the little blue lamp was the greatest variable. It was mysterious, formidable, and even the naked will to destroy the world itself. All of this was further proof that it was extraordinary. Since the little blue lamp had chosen to fuse with space, then it wasn't impossible for this incomplete spatial fragment to give birth to complete rules. Well, this explanation was indeed complicated and tongue-twisting, but it could be summed up in a single sentence. Qin Yu had sufficient confidence in the little blue lamp. This was because it had never disappointed him. Qin Yu took a deep breath and smiled. He was filled with endless confidence towards his future road of cultivation. There would come a day when he would be able to control his own destiny. The second day of perceiving the good fortune tablet came to an end. Unfortunately, a pleasant surprise similar to yesterday's from the Eclipse clan didn't appear. The youths all sighed inwardly. Indeed, the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill wasn't easy to obtain. Their eyes fell on Zhao Jiutian's back as he walked away with his hands behind his back. Subconsciously, they felt a bit more awe. Respecting the strong was one of the most instinctive principles in the hearts of all cultivators. Luckily, no one had any harvest today. This caused everyone to feel a bit gratified. But this sort of situation wouldn't continue forever. On the sixth day, a young man named Wei Yuan suddenly opened his eyes, a smile on his face. He was originally suppressing himself, not wanting to make too much noise. But the wild joy that surged in his heart caused his smile to turn into a hearty laugh. Countless people's hearts shook. They silently looked over, envy in their eyes. The black door soon opened. Wei Ziqing and Chief Steward Qin walked in with smiles on their faces, sincerely congratulating Wei Yuan. The second person to perceive the pill recipe for the revival good fortune pill appeared. Zhao Jiutian's success on the first day had surpassed everyone's expectations, but it could only be considered an accident. But Wei Yuan's success placed a tremendous pressure on the youths. Under this pressure, they would either sink into oblivion or they would erupt. Thus, on the eighth day, Black Bei became the third person to perceive the pill recipe. His success caused even more youths to clench their fists and bite their lips. The gas of people that had used their connections to enter had all succeeded, but they were still bitterly struggling. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they had lost face. On the 10th day, there were actually 2 cultivators that succeeded in an hour. Shaoxiang's Fang Zinan, Waterfront's Yu Mingxing. On the 13th day, another person succeeded. On the 27th day, White Feng revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. But in the blink of an eye, her eyes filled with worry as she looked at Qin Yu. This was because even today, after nearly a month had passed, the best big brother value in her heart still hadn't had any harvests. Chapter 346. Wei Ziqing welcomed them with a smile. Then he brought white foam away. Unlike the little girl who had a worried and reluctant expression, Lord Wei's eyes never lingered on Qinyu. The silent bus was empty. 9 of the original 13 people were left behind in the heavily guarded square building. Starting from 10 days ago, Chief Steward Qin had been keeping an eye on the refining of the revival good fortune pill. Now, he was responsible for escorting 2 people. They could be considered familiar faces. They were 2 of the 3 divine souls that had brought them here the first time. However, the attitudes of these 2 divine soul realm martial artists were extremely cold. They sat in the carriage with their eyes closed in meditation. There wasn't even a tiny bit of the attitude they had when they were conversing with Qinyu. No miracle happened the next day. In the blink of an eye, it was the 29th day. Today, the atmosphere on the bus was clearly stifling. Besides Qinyu, the other 3 young cultivators all had pale complexions and their sunken eye sockets were red. It was clear they hadn't slept well last night. The bus stopped outside a square building. The 2 divine soul cultivators didn't move at all. They watched as the 4 people got off the bus and entered. Then, one of them suddenly said, "This Ning Qin, his breathing skills are quite good." Another person sneered. "What's the use? If you can't comprehend the Dan formula, you're trash. After tomorrow, you'll naturally go back to where you came from." He shook his head and cursed in a low voice. "The 2 bottles of sour plum juice I gave him were worth a lot of money, but now it seems I've completely misjudged them. This brat really got lucky." The person who spoke first shook his head and didn't say anything. He felt that this junior Ning Qin was too quiet and calm. Could it be that he had something to rely on? After passing through the passageway, Wei Ziqing opened the door expressionlessly. It was his duty to open the door for the first time every day, and he could not hand it over to anyone else, but that was all. After opening the door, Lord Wei turned and left. Today, Zhao Jiutian had reached a critical moment in refining the revival good fortune pill. He naturally didn't want to waste any more time here. The good fortune tablet was still as dazzling as it was in the beginning. Qinyu sat down and looked at the dark golden lines. He sighed inwardly. There was a time limit to perceiving the good fortune tablet. 1 month was the final time limit. If one couldn't perceive the pill recipe, then staying here for 10 years was useless. Therefore, today could be said to be his last chance, because at this time tomorrow, it would be difficult for him to meditate under the immense mental pressure. There was no possibility of comprehension at all. Qinyu naturally didn't feel nervous at all. It was just that after waiting for an entire month, the world-killing tribulation still hadn't arrived. This left him feeling a bit restless, because this definitely didn't mean that the will of the world was being lenient and temporarily letting him go. The only explanation was that it was currently accumulating power for a great move. This was a bit different from what Qinyu sensed at the start, but he could roughly guess what the reason was. The little blue lamp had fused into that distant spatial fragment and was borrowing the power of nothingness to sever all auras. Perhaps this was the last time that the worlds would easily lock onto him, so it placed even more importance on him. To Qinyu, this definitely wasn't a good thing, but he couldn't find a solution. His chest surged with irritation, and he couldn't help but sigh. In the dead silence of the grotto, this soft sigh was incomparably clear. Immediately, the other 3 people's efforts to restrain their thoughts were broken, and an inexplicable anger rose in them. "Ning Qin, who are you trying to put on such a calm look for today? I don't believe that your heart can be so calm." Zheng Xiaoguan no longer had his usual elegant and gentlemanly demeanor. His hair was messily tied up and hid a sneer on his face. Yan Mingxin, who had a good relationship with him, also had a dark and gloomy expression. I have long since disliked fellow Taoist Ning Qin's nauseating attitude. A failure is a failure, so why force yourself to appear so calm? Could it be that fellow Taoist thinks that the South China Nation officials will look at you differently just because you have a good mental fortitude? The last person sneered. "Even if I can remain calm, what use is there even if the world collapses and I don't blink? If I can't perceive the pill recipe, then there is no need to mention anything else." Qinyu frowned. These 3 people definitely didn't have such a rash and aggressive temperament. It was likely that the pressure was too great and their minds were unbalanced, and they had also been affected by the decaying aura of the good fortune tablet. Even so, that didn't mean that he had to endure these three people. Moreover, Qin Yu wasn't in a good mood right now. Zheng Xiaowan's heart was tumbling with emotions. Just as he was about to continue venting, he saw that silent figure look up. The icy coldness in his eyes caused him to stiffen and an instinctive fear to rise in his heart. No matter what he said, he couldn't speak. Luckily, at this time, the black door suddenly opened, saving Zheng Xiaowan's face. He let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he was also curious as to what had happened. Zhao Jiuqian walked in with his head held high. After 20 days, he was clearly much weaker than before. There were even several strands of white in his black hair. It seemed that he had suffered greatly in refining the revival good fortune pill. But at this time, he had a proud and arrogant expression on his face. Every movement he made contained an imposing aura, as if he had an awe-inspiring spirit. Zheng Xiaowan's heart shook. He wasn't an idiot. He knew what it meant for Zhao Jiuqian to return after leaving for over 10 days. He had actually refined the revival good fortune pill. For a time, all of the anger and mockery faded away, leaving behind only a sense of loss and hesitation. Compared to him, the four people in the cave today were absolute losers. Zhao Jiuqian strode forwards, his eyes looking straight ahead, ignoring everyone else. When he was 30 feet away from the good fortune tablet, a dark golden halo of light appeared. Originally, this light was to prevent anyone from approaching. But as it touched Zhao Jiuqian's figure, it scattered and wrapped around him. Like this, there was no longer any chance of a fluke. Several envious sighs sounded out. Qin Yu stared at Zhao Jiuqian, not wanting to miss a single moment. He wanted to know just what sort of changes would occur after the good fortune tablet obtained the revival good fortune pill. Zhao Jiuqian took a deep breath. He took out a pitch-black jade bottle from his chest, one that was impossible to see clearly. The good fortune tablet erupted with a dark golden light that swept it away. After several breaths of time, the dark golden light appeared once more, covering Zhao Jiuqian. This process didn't continue for too long. A gentle strength sent him 30 feet away. Zhao Jiuqian's eyes were closed, his body gently shivering. He couldn't suppress the ecstasy on his face. One could easily guess that he had obtained unimaginable benefits from the good fortune tablet. A trace of disappointment appeared in his eyes. He had originally hoped to see something, but it was clear that his thoughts were empty. It seemed that he could only wait for himself to make a sacrifice in order to reach a conclusion. Shua, Zhao Jiuqian opened his eyes, a divine light sparkling within them. After being covered in the dark golden light for several breaths of time, although there was still a bit of white in his hair, his spirit had been restored. A strange light flashed in Zhao Jiuqian's eyes. He turned and locked onto Qin Yu. At the same time, he could see the disappointment on Qin Yu's face. Disappointment? His heart skipped a beat before he sneered. Even today, you were still trying to play tricks on me. Ning Qin. Oh, Ning Qin. What qualifications do you have to express disappointment in me? The corners of his lips curled up in a cold smile. Although it wasn't too strong, it was still domineering to the extreme. Ning Qin, on the second day, I warned you not to fall too far behind. It seems you didn't take me to heart at all. I am truly disappointed. Zhao Jiuqian took several steps forwards and arrived in front of Qin Yu. He lowered his voice and said, "In the competition, you ruined my plans and nearly cut off my future prospects. Did you ever expect today's result? If you can't perceive the pill recipe, then you have no value to the South Shine Nation. I guarantee that you will suffer a miserable fate in the future." Looking at the two people whispering to each other, Zheng Xiaowan's eyes lit up with joy. Today, Zhao Jiuqian had come with the momentum of refining the revival good fortune pill. Even if Ning Qin had 100 methods at his disposal, he would still be humiliated. Yan Mingxin and Qin Yu also sneered. As expected, Qinyu took a step back. He lowered his head. He must have been filled with grief and indignation, but he had no choice but to retreat. The three people were waiting for something even more wonderful to occur. But what happened next caused their sneers to freeze on their faces. Their eyes widened and they froze in place, their bodies turning cold. Pa. The syllable was simple and could be emitted from many places. But the most classic was naturally the unprotected intimate contact between the face and the five fingers. Qinyu slowly drew back his hand. His expression was calm and his voice light. What I dislike the most in my life is being threatened in front of my face. So, I usually strike back. If I offended you in any way, I apologize, but if there's a next time, I will still strike you. Zhao Jiuqian's face rapidly swelled up, and 5 clear finger marks appeared. His body shivered in anger before he suddenly calmed down. His eyes were filled with hatred. Good, very good. Since you want to seek death, how can I not help you? After being knocked to the ground, Zhao Jiuqian calmly stood up. He brushed away the non-existent dust on his body and cupped his hands together towards the black stone door. Lord Wei, Chief Steward Qin, I ask that you two uphold justice for Jiutian. No one thought that after being slapped to the ground, Zhao Jiuqian wouldn't stand up and fight back, but instead choose to complain. Zheng Xiaoguan was stunned for a moment before he secretly admired Qinyu. A true man could bow and submit when necessary. Although this was easy to say, there were very few people who could actually do this. Zhao Jiutian's actions seemed a bit weak, but it was actually the best choice he could make. With the smallest price, he could borrow the hands of the officials to destroy Qinyu. Today, he had used the revival good fortune pill to complete the sacrifice. This was the moment when the South Shy Nation officials placed the most importance on him. Ning Qin's slap had indeed vented his anger, but it had also forced him into a hopeless situation. Humph humph, you were pretending to be calm just now, so why are you acting so impulsive now? Let's see just how you deal with this. Wei Ziqing and Qin Wushang walked out from the door together, their complexions gloomy. Originally, the South Shy Nation officials had placed a great deal of attention on Ning Qin because of his amazing performance in the competition. But reality proved that the results of the competition didn't represent anything at all. After meditating on the pill recipe on the first day and completing the refinement in a month, Zhao Jiuqian even had the possibility of refining a second revival good fortune pill. They were preparing to wantonly win him over, but Ning Qin had actually slapped him in the face. Then, they had to satisfy Zhao Jiuqian before they could persuade him to continue refining pills. As for Ning Qin, since he was useless, there was no need to consider him any further. Wei Ziqing and Qin Wushang didn't speak, but from their gloomy complexions, one could roughly guess what they were thinking. Zhao Jiuqian's lips curved up in a cold smile. If someone dared to slap him, then they had to be prepared for eternal damnation. Ning Qin, no one can save you this time. Chief Steward Qin was expressionless. His eyes were slightly lowered. With his status, it wasn't convenient for him to act at this time. Wei Ziqing coldly said, Ning Qin, you dare to attack someone in front of the good fortune tablet? You are far too arrogant. Do you even have the slightest bit of awe towards my South Shy Nation's holy object? Men, seize Ning Qin and lock him up in the dungeon. Hold on. Qinyu paused for a moment. Then he smiled. After this junior slapped you just now, my mind was refreshed, and I seem to have perceived the pill recipe. Chapter 347. The expectant Zheng Xiaoguan, Yin Mingxin, and the others all cried out in alarm. Impossible! Zhao Jiuqian's complexion stiffened. The ridicule in his eyes deepened. Ning Qin, have you really been scared silly? You actually dare to say such ignorant words. A pill recipe isn't something that can be perceived just because you say so. You need the ringing of a great bell to prove it. Now that everything is quiet, your lies fall apart. Qinyu smiled. Is fellow Taoist Zhao referring to this bell ringing? He lifted a hand. The distant ringing of the bell passed through countless obstacles. By the time it reached here, it had already become extremely light. If it weren't for the door being opened, it would have been impossible to hear it from within the cave. But it existed. The sound of this bell couldn't be faked. Zhao Jiutian's eyes revealed a look of unwillingness and resentment. Today, his plan to borrow a knife to kill Qin Yu was no longer feasible. Even if he wanted to personally attack, he wouldn't have the chance to do so. The Southshine Nation officials would never allow him to harm Qin Yu, who had perceived the pill recipe. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He swept his eyes over the shocked crowd, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He quickly thought about it and determined just how feasible it was. Then, he immediately made a decision. Then today, he would let himself be in the limelight. He would let these people know that pill recipes were a very simple matter for him. Thus, under Zhao Jiutian's unwilling gaze, Qin Yu lifted a hand once more and pointed at the void. The bell rang out a second time. Wei Ziqing's eyes widened, his face filled with shock. At some unknown time, Qin Wushang had looked up, a sharp light surging in his eyes. But this wasn't the end. He lifted a hand and pointed a third time. The bell rang out once more. White Feng Feng had a worried expression. Together with Black Bei Bei, they followed the Southshine Nation officials to choose the medicinal materials needed to refine the revival good fortune pill. At this time, the first bell rang out. White Feng Feng was stunned for a moment before she looked up. It's Ning Qin, it must be him. I knew he could do it. White Feng Feng didn't care about choosing any more herbs. She turned and ran towards the good fortune tablet. Black Bei Bei's eyes relaxed. He quickly followed behind, leaving behind the official with a dumbfounded expression. When the bell rang out a second time, halfway there, White Feng Feng and Black Bei Bei both revealed looks of surprise. They never imagined that someone would make a breakthrough at the last moment. But in this case, the possibility of it being Ning Qin was higher. The two of them smiled even more. But when the bell rang for the third time, the two of them sensed that something was wrong. It was unheard of for three people to comprehend a pill recipe in a row. A sense of curiosity arose from the bottom of their hearts. The two of them moved even faster, wanting to know what had happened. Then, as they hurried on their way, the bell rang for the fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time. In the end, the two of them were no longer in the mood to count. They just subconsciously opened their mouths wide, their minds buzzing. Along the way, the cultivators they met all had shocked expressions on their faces. Everyone's mind was in a mess. Could it be that the big clock was broken? Yes, it must be broken. White Feng Feng walked through the long passageway. When she arrived in front of the cave's entrance, she saw that everyone was left dumbfounded. Qin Yu's figure stood tall and straight in the crowd. She could see that he was slowly lifting his hand and constantly pointing it down. And with every finger he pointed, a bell would ring out. Even classmate White Feng Feng, who had always been confident in Qin Yu, couldn't help but freeze in place. She felt as if she were in a dream. At this time, Qin Yu saw her. He smiled and nodded a greeting. Then, perhaps because he thought that if he continued like this, everyone's eyes would pop out of their sockets. So he drew back his hand and faintly smiled. Zhao Jiutian, does this prove that I have perceived the pill recipe? Zhao Jiutian's cheeks twitched. His lips moved, but he couldn't speak. He crazily howled in his heart. This was fake, it was all fake. There had to be a problem, or perhaps Ning Qin had done something to it. But his remaining reason told him that it was best not to speak. Otherwise there would be trouble, great trouble. Because at this time, Wei Ziqing and Qin Wushang's eyes were as bright as light bulbs. The warmth in their eyes could nearly melt steel. Little friend Ning Qin, you've kept me in the dark for so long. If it weren't for today's situation, would you have continued hiding it? Chief Steward Qin bitterly smiled. He quickly walked forwards. These past days, I've been focusing on refining the revival good fortune pill, so I have neglected little friend Ning Qin. Please don't take it to heart. Wei Ziqing was all smiles. I knew that little friend Ning Qin, as the #1 ranker of the competition, would one day amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, just as I thought. Today was just as I thought. Qin Yu felt that he had underestimated the skin of these great figures. The fact that their attitudes could change so naturally and smoothly was truly amazing. However, this was the effect he wanted. He smiled and said, "Today, this junior couldn't restrain himself and had a conflict with fellow Taoist Zhao Zhutian. I'm truly ashamed of myself." Chief Steward Qin waved his hand. There was no conflict. You are all young and impatient, so it's normal for there to be some disputes. I believe that little friend, Zhao, absolutely won't care about this, right? The corners of Zhao Zhutian's eyes jumped up. At this time, half his face was swollen like a steamed bun. What nonsense dispute? It was that bastard Ning Qin who hit me. He hit me. But while he could think of this, he absolutely couldn't say it out loud. He grit his teeth and squeezed out a smile. Yes, this junior doesn't care at all. Chief Steward Qin smiled in satisfaction. Little friend Ning Qin has heard it. This was all a misunderstanding. What I want to know the most right now is how little friend Ning Qin perceived so many pill recipes. Wei Ziqing suddenly said, "Lord Chief Steward, little friend Ning Qin might be tired today. Let him rest first before we discuss these matters." Qin Wushang suddenly said, "That's right. It was I who was confused." Qin Yu smiled at White Feng and left with the two of them. As for Zhao Zhutian, no one cared about him anymore, even if he had just sacrificed the revival good fortune pill. In the heavily guarded and solemn-looking square building, no one imagined that there would be such a luxuriously decorated room, one that exuded a noble atmosphere. Little friend Ning Qin, are you satisfied with this residence? If you don't like it, feel free to say so. Wei Ziqing smiled. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. This junior likes it very much. Thank you, Lord Wei. It's good that you like it. Wei Ziqing's eyes flashed. Little friend Ning Qin, is it about pill recipes? Qin Yu thought for a moment. Obtaining pill recipes isn't difficult. What is difficult is how to repair the good fortune tablet's condition. After meditating for a month, I have some clues. Repair the good fortune tablet? Qin Wushang's complexion changed. Little friend Ning Qin, are you confident? Qin Yu shook his head. This junior cannot guarantee anything, but I will do my best. Qin Wushang said, if little friend Ning Qin has any requests, feel free to ask. If you can really repair the good fortune tablet, my South Shine Nation will be eternally grateful. Without staying for long, the two bid their farewells and left. Qin Wushang directly said, Lord Wei, please look after little friend Ning Qin. I must immediately return to the palace. Wei Ziqing cupped his hands together. Lord Chief Steward, please rest assured. Qin Wushang quickly left. He sat in a private carriage and raced towards the royal palace at the fastest speed possible. The journey was unimpeded. After a moment, he arrived at the royal palace's parking lot. Qin Wushang pushed open the door and left in a hurry. Soon, he arrived outside a pitch-black hall. He flashed his token to the icy guard and was allowed to enter. The transmission array in the hall lit up. Qin Wushang's figure appeared once more. He was in a dark hall, and the air was filled with the faint smell of decay. Stepping out of the transmission array, Qin Wushang fell to his knees. He respectfully said, Wushang greets the old ancestor. In the center of the hall, there was an altar with 9 oil lamps. The skeletal figure's eyes burst out with a sharp light. What happened? The voice was low and hoarse, containing an unquestionable momentum. Qin Wushang respectfully recounted today's events, not adding or deleting anything. After a long silence, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor suddenly laughed. Ning Qin? I knew that he was the turning point for me to break through my shackles and change my destiny. As I thought, he didn't disappoint me. Qin Wushang threw himself to the ground. Congratulations, old ancestor. Under the dim light of the oil lamps, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's wizened and corpse-like face was illuminated, causing his smile to become even more sinister and horrifying. But soon, this smile vanished, and he revealed a thoughtful expression. Ning Qin was able to perceive 29 pill recipes, and, as you said, he might have concealed a great deal. Could it be that he has already seen through the truth of the good fortune tablet? Qin Wushang kept his mouth shut. He knew that the old ancestor was only thinking out loud. There was no need for him to say anything. As expected, a cold light flashed in the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's eyes. Tell Ning Qin that I'm satisfied with his performance. Have him immediately refine a revival good fortune pill. After he offers it, the good fortune tablet will give him some hints. Qin Wushang respectfully nodded. He carefully crawled up from the ground, took several steps back, and then walked into the transmission array. Shua. Qin Wushang returned to the grand hall on the ground. As he walked out, he praised the old ancestor in his heart. The old ancestor's methods were truly swift and fierce. With just a single move, he was able to capture Qin Yu. As long as he sacrificed the revival good fortune pill, he would never be able to escape the old ancestor's grasp. To Qin Yu, a single bell ring 29 times was easy. After seeing through the dark golden runes on the good fortune tablet, obtaining the pill recipe was as easy as reaching out his hand. The reason he did this was to shock the South Shine Nation officials and also to buy more time for himself. To be able to obtain the old ancestor's attention without needing to personally refine the revival good fortune pill. In Qin Yu's opinion, this was the best result. But looking at Qin Wushang's amiable smile, he forced a smile inwardly. He knew that his little tricks were far too immature in front of the old ancestor who was so old that he had turned into a monster. At the same time, he was able to confirm that there was another reason for sacrificing the revival good fortune pill. But even if Qin Yu knew this, he still couldn't refuse. Otherwise, it would arouse suspicion and lead to unpredictable consequences. So, beneath Qin Wushang's casual gaze, he frowned and slowly nodded. The old ancestor's words are reasonable. It was this junior who was wrong. Tomorrow, I will begin refining the pill. Qin Wushang laughed. Great. Little friend, what do you need? Give me the list of materials, and I will immediately prepare them. Qin Yu nodded. After marking the list, he handed the jade slip to Qin Wushang. The latter stood up and bid his farewells. Qin Yu sat in place, not moving. After a long time, he let out a long breath. He had already decided that he absolutely could not complete the pill refinement tomorrow. Even if he had to waste some of his lifespan, he had to delay it. The night passed without incident. The next day, Qin Wushang personally knocked on Qin Yu's door and led him to a brand new alchemy room. Little friend Qin Yu, the materials are all in your storage ring. Since you obtained the treasure furnace from the competition, I didn't prepare another pill furnace. Chief Steward Qin smiled. The old ancestor said that he believes little friend might be able to refine the pill today. Qin Yu felt a chill in his heart. He forced a smile. The old ancestor thinks too highly of this junior. I really don't have full confidence. Chapter 348. Qin Yu's complexion darkened. These words were clearly a reminder. It seemed that he could only use this method of refining failure once or twice at most, otherwise it would lead to trouble. This would at most delay him for another half a month. That damned world-killing tribulation. Just when was it going to arrive? Qin Yu cursed inwardly. After a long time, he took a deep breath and suppressed his tumbling emotions. He lifted his hand and took out 9 province, as well as all the materials in his storage ring. The most obvious sign of a failure in refining the revival good fortune pill was that it would consume a cultivator's lifespan. Thus, Qin Yu really had to do it. The pill recipe appeared in his mind. In truth, calling it a pill recipe wasn't too accurate. It was more accurate to call it a pure fluctuation of consciousness. Only by perceiving the cultivator could one truly understand the meaning within. Otherwise, even if the pill recipe was repeated, no one would be able to successfully refine it. This was because consciousness itself was the most difficult to control. A single mistake in understanding or expression would lead to failure. As this consciousness flowed through Qin Yu's mind, he didn't need to think too much. His body instinctively knew how to refine it. He lit the furnace fire and threw in the materials. The entire process was unprecedentedly smooth, as if Qin Yu had already refined this pill countless times. Every movement he made was incomparably smooth. In fact, he even began to fall into a trance. With the attitude of an indifferent bystander, he watched the entire refining process. At this time, if someone were to see Qin Yu's eyes, they would discover that his pupils had enlarged to the point that they occupied his entire eye. His entire body was pitch black, strange to the extreme. After an unknown period of time, Qin Yu suddenly slapped Ninth Province. The furnace sprung open and a pill the size of a knuckle flew out. This pill emitted a shrill cry and then split open like a giant mouth, biting down on Qin Yu's finger. Gulp, gulp. A trace of fear erupted from the depths of his heart, forcefully breaking Qin Yu's indifferent mood. His pitch-black eyes revealed a trace of struggle, and his consciousness was filled with shock. It was like he had just experienced a dream, and when he woke up, the revival good fortune pill was about to be refined. A sour, stabbing pain, swelling feeling spread out from every inch of his body. Even his entire soul was gently shivering at this time. This was because what the pill was swallowing wasn't just his blood, but his vitality. In just a short period of time, Qin Yu could feel at least 5 years of his lifespan being taken away. I can't let it condense smoothly. Qin Yu sucked in a deep breath. Just as he was preparing to forcefully stop the supply of lifespan and ruin the pill formation process, a sudden sense of fear drilled out from the depths of his heart. At this moment, his body suddenly tensed up, the hairs on his back stood on end, and boundless terror enveloped his entire mind. The revival good fortune pill seemed to sense this aura. It let out a shrill howl, and the speed at which it was plundering longevity suddenly increased. Exhaustion appeared on Qin Yu's face. His skin lost most of its luster, and a lock of hair on his forehead began to turn gray at a visible speed. This kind of gray was not pure gray. Instead, it gave off a feeling of absolute loneliness and despair. 10 years of life, 20 years of life, 50 years of life. Qin Yu could clearly feel this, but he didn't stop it. Because just now, he finally felt the aura of the world-killing tribulation. It was finally coming. Just sensing this aura was enough to make Qin Yu feel as if he had died once. The might of this world-killing tribulation would inevitably reach an unimaginably terrifying boundary. Qin Yu had to make the South Shy Nation's old ancestor value him 10 times, 100 times more. Only then would he be willing to recklessly protect him when the world-killing tribulation arrived. Thus, not only did Qin Yu have to refine this revival good fortune pill, but he had to refine it in a way that surpassed everyone's imagination. 70 years of life, 90 years of life, 100 years. When all of Qin Yu's hair had turned black and mottled, the revival good fortune pill that had been biting his finger finally escaped his mouth. It floated in the air, countless runes appearing on its surface, weaving together into a blood-red flower bud. That's right, this was a flower that Qin Yu had never seen before. But when he looked at it, he could hear countless mournful wails. Every petal was exquisite to the extreme, vivid and lifelike, as if it were really growing on this revival good fortune pill. Qin Yu staggered. He suppressed the feeling of weakness that nearly caused him to collapse. He reached out a hand and picked up a jade bottle that he had specially prepared and placed it within. After doing this, he finally couldn't withstand it any longer. His vision darkened, and he fell into a deep slumber. Qin Yu had a nightmare. He dreamed that within his body, a seed had suddenly sprouted, absorbing his flesh and blood to grow. But he could only watch helplessly on as vines wrapped around him, turning him into a miserable pile of rotten bones. Ah! With a loud cry, Qin Yu opened his eyes. At some unknown time, he had returned to his dwelling. Although his body was still sore and weak, he had recovered some of his strength. Although he knew that it was only a dream just now, as he recalled that vivid feeling, Qin Yu felt his heart turn cold. He quickly suppressed his thoughts. The door opened from the outside. As a beautiful maid saw Qin Yu wake up, she was pleasantly surprised. She bowed and hurried away. Soon, Chief Steward Qin walked in. But after he entered, he only glanced at Qin Yu before standing to the side, bowing his head in respect. The old man who came in was thin, and his eyes were bright and warm. A warm smile hung on his lips. Qin Yu's eyes widened. Just as he was about to stand up, he was stopped by this old man. "Little friend has spent a great deal of effort to save my South Shine Nation's holy relic. I am also grateful, so there is no need to be so polite." Looking at the smiling old man in front of the window, Qin Yu's heart shook. He never thought that with this old man's status, he would personally come here. This old man was the incarnation of the South Shine Nation's old ancestor. Qin Yu had already seen him at the Marshall Field. "Old ancestor, this junior is too frightened. I don't know what to say." Qin Yu's thoughts raced. It seemed as if he had already achieved his goal. But his face perfectly displayed the fear and trepidation that a junior should have. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled, satisfied with Qin Yu's response. "You have lost a great deal of your lifespan this time. Although I have already ordered people to give you the most precious treasures, they still cannot restore your lifespan. But I guarantee you that everything you have paid will be compensated twice as much." Chief Steward Qin said in a soft voice. "Ning Qin, in order to help you recover as soon as possible, the old ancestor didn't hesitate to personally take action. You must not feel any resentment in your heart." Qin Yu quickly shook his head. He earnestly said, "Everything was done voluntarily by this junior. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for this revival good fortune pill to absorb so much of my lifespan." His expression was calm and sincere, but his heart was heavy. To the current Qin Yu, losing 100 years of lifespan was a price he couldn't bear. But in the face of the world's killing tribulation, he could only do this in order to survive. Chief Steward Qin praised Qin Yu several times, praising him until he looked like a blooming flower. After Qin Yu revealed an excited expression, he casually brought up the main topic. "Ning Qin, the old ancestor's time is precious. In order to save you, he has already delayed a great deal. When do you think you can make the sacrifice? The old ancestor is also looking forward to seeing the effects of this revival good fortune pill." The South Shine Nation's old ancestor smiled, not speaking. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. He quickly said, "This junior can do it now." He struggled to stand up. There was no need to pretend at all. In his dizzy state, Qin Yu tottered. Chief Steward Qin supported him. "Ning Qin, can you continue?" Qin Yu's heart became increasingly cold. He smiled and nodded. Luckily, after walking for a while, his limbs and bones began to emit a bit of warmth. The building that housed the good fortune tablet seemed to have been cleared out today. Along the way, he didn't encounter anyone. Qin Yu was supported all the way to the black door. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor flicked his sleeves, and the door slowly opened. He was the first to enter. Chief Steward Qin let go. "Ning Qin, begin." Qin Yu walked towards the stone tablet. Behind him, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor still had a calm expression. It was just that a bit more dignified and dignified. 30 feet away, a dark golden halo appeared. But it didn't stop Qin Yu at all. Rather, it impatiently wrapped around Qin Yu and pulled him close. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's eyes erupted with a bright light, revealing a hint of excitement. An extremely rich dark golden light covered Qin Yu. A will sounded out in his mind, asking him whether or not he was willing to make the sacrifice. Qin Yu was nervous. He took a deep breath and chose to confirm. In his hand, the jade bottle that held the revival good fortune pill flew up on its own, vanishing into the dark golden light. Qin Yu could feel the jade bottle being crushed by an invisible strength. The pill that contained 100 years of his life was like a drop of water falling into the sea, falling into the good fortune tablet. In front of Qin Yu, a dark golden rune suddenly erupted with an unimaginable light. Massive sections of the blocked passage rapidly melted away. In just several breaths of time, the withered passage was restored to its original state. He could hear the excited cheers of the dark golden rune in his ears. From the brink of destruction, it had obtained a new life. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor's face suddenly flushed red. The ground beneath his feet quietly disintegrated into powder. As his eyes fell on Qin Yu's back, they turned blazing hot. Indeed, he hadn't guessed wrong. This junior was his greatest lucky chance. Qin Yu, who was regarded as the greatest lucky chance by the South Shy Nation's old ancestor, revealed a look of astonishment and shock on his nervous face. He never thought that he would encounter such a situation. Perhaps it was because the revival good fortune pill contained far too much of Qin Yu's life. But after it was absorbed by the good fortune tablet and repaired the dark golden rune, there was still some left over. It was these leftovers that preserved some of Qin Yu's blood within the pill. He didn't know what to say, but it seemed as if this blood was being absorbed by the good fortune tablet itself. Then, there was a faint bloodline connection between Qin Yu and himself. Recognizing him as master, Qin Yu never imagined that the pill he dreaded so much as a sacrifice would actually cause such a result. Like this, the good fortune tablet in front of him had become his. No, right now, there was only a faint bloodline connection with him. It couldn't be considered a complete refinement. In order to truly recognize him as master, he would need more blood. Even so, through this connection, Qin Yu finally understood why the South Shy Nation regarded the good fortune tablet as a holy object and why the old ancestor regarded the revival good fortune pill with such importance. A deep chill flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. He spent a great deal of effort to suppress the shaking in his heart. His thoughts raced. This was because he discovered that he seemed to have some sort of chance to turn from guest to host. But in order to do this, he would have to pay even more of his life. Chapter 349. Suddenly, the good fortune tablet gently trembled. Its small body emitted an endless momentum, as if it were an ancient divine mountain that supported the heavens and earth. Then, bathed in the dark golden light, Qin Yu's thoughts were suddenly interrupted. His eyes widened in shock, endless shock filling his face. This was because at this time, an extremely pure magic power, with the dark golden light as a medium, fused into his body through his pores. Although there was a vast amount of it, it didn't cause any pressure to Qin Yu at all. He felt as if he were soaking in warm water, so comfortable that he almost fell asleep. But right now, Qin Yu didn't have any thoughts of sleeping. His mind was filled with excitement and disbelief. This was because the magic power that fused into his body seemed to be his own strength to begin with. Without any rejection, it gathered in his Dantian sea and was absorbed by the five-element nascent souls. Qin Yu could hear the excited cheers of the nascent souls. As they crazily absorbed the magic power, their cultivations began to rapidly rise. Nascent soul, 5th level. Nascent soul, 6th level. Nascent soul, 7th level. Nascent soul, 8th level. Qin Yu was originally worried that this sort of rapidly rising cultivation would cause his foundation to become unstable and affect his future cultivation. But he soon discovered that he was worrying too much. The magic power that came from the good fortune tablet seemed to have been tempered countless times. After it was thoroughly tempered, it transformed into Qin Yu's cultivation. Not only did his foundation not become unstable because of this, but because he absorbed this magic power, it became even more stable than before. Finally, when the dark golden light faded away, Qin Yu's cultivation broke through another level, reaching the early 9th level of nascent soul. In just a moment, he had gone from the middle 4th level of nascent soul to the early 9th level. This was an increase of nearly 5 levels. It was simply inconceivable. Cultivation was like climbing up a mountain. The higher one went, the steeper it would be. If Qin Yu were to climb this 5 levels at a time, he would need at least 2 years. Moreover, he would need a massive amount of pills to cultivate without interruption. Only then could he just barely accomplish this. A gentle strength sent Qin Yu away. The South Shy Nation's old ancestor smiled. Ning Qin, are you satisfied with the return my country's holy object has given you? Qin Yu respectfully said, this junior is very satisfied. He had spent 100 years of his life to obtain 3 portions of the Good Fortune Tablet, a 9th-level nascent soul cultivation. He really didn't know if this transaction was worth it or not. Of course, he couldn't reveal any of his thoughts. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor laughed. "Ning Qin, I have a good impression of you. Keep working hard." After giving him a deep look, he turned around and left. Chief Steward Qin's eyes flashed. He had been by the old ancestor's side for many years, so he could hear the hidden meaning in his words. Qin Yu returned to his dwelling, a dignified expression on his face. Qin Wushang could hear the meaning behind the South Shine Nation's old ancestor's words, and it wasn't as if he didn't realize it. But what should he do next? His complexion darkened for a long time. Then, he clenched his teeth and revealed a decisive look. Chief Steward Qin came to visit as expected. He didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his intentions. "Little friend Ning Qin, the old ancestor is extremely satisfied with the revival good fortune pill you refined. I hope that you can refine another one." Qin Yu revealed an awkward expression. He sneered inwardly. This old fart will be able to live for at least a few more decades, so of course he would be satisfied. This was because the so-called South Shine Nation's holy object was in essence the South Shine Nation's old ancestor. 100,000 years ago, the Huluan tribe had suffered countless casualties. Finally, they seized the stone tablet that fell from the sky. The great elder of the tribe spent 100 years and finally comprehended a trace of the profound mystery. He fused his own vitality with it and borrowed the power of the stone tablet to create an almost immortal body. Like this, he lived for a full 100,000 years. That's right, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor was the Huluan tribe's great elder of the past. This matter could be called the South Shine Nation's greatest secret. The number of people that had the qualifications to know of this could be counted on a single hand. Qin Yu was only able to learn of this through his connection with the Good Fortune Tablet. Although he already had a plan in mind, Qin Yu remained silent. He waited for Qin Wushang to state his conditions. And indeed, Chief Steward Qin said in a low voice, "The old ancestor knows that refining this pill will consume a great deal of your lifespan, so he ordered me to make a promise to you. If you agree to refine it again, you can freely choose any treasures from the South Shine Nation's treasury." Qin Yu's eyes brightened as if he were moved, but there was still a bit of hesitation in his eyes. Qin Wushang wasn't surprised. The temptation of a nation's treasury could be imagined. He smiled and said, "Little friend Ning Qin, so what if I lose some of my lifespan? You are already at the 9th level of nascent soul, and breaking into divine soul is just around the corner. At that time, if you lose some of your lifespan, you can make it back with interest." As if moved, Qin Yu clenched his teeth and said, "I can agree, but I must take several more treasures." Qin Wushang lightly said, "All right." He was only a nascent soul junior. Even if he entered the treasury, how much would he dare take? It had to be known that any random item inside was priceless. Unfortunately, Chief Steward Qin didn't know that Qin Yu already knew how important the revival good fortune pill he refined was to the old ancestor of the South Shine Nation. Thus, the following experience couldn't be considered wonderful for him. As soon as he said he would leave, Qin Yu sat in Chief Steward Qin's private car and sped towards the royal palace. On the way, through the car window, he experienced for the first time the magnificence and prosperity of the capital city. It was truly extraordinary. In the parking lot, Chief Steward Qin pushed open the door. He had made a phone call before, so there were already people waiting for him. "Little friend Ning Qin, let's go." The South Shine Nation's treasury was as he expected. It was built deep within the royal palace, and there was naturally no need to mention how heavily guarded it was. What startled Qin Yu the most was that there was a faintly discernible aura that covered the entire world. If anything were to happen, it would instantly welcome a destructive attack. A strange light flashed in Chief Steward Qin's eyes. He had deliberately arranged this so that Qin Yu would feel awe and awe in his heart. Afterwards, he naturally wouldn't dare to be too insolent. Even so, his expression was light and carefree. He reached out a hand and gestured, little friend Ning Qin, please." The treasury had 9 doors, and each one had a different method of opening them. Even though Chief Steward Qin had brought a warrant, the entire process was tedious and tedious. After the 9th door opened, Chief Steward Qin let out a light breath. He smiled and said, "Welcome to my nation's treasury." At first glance, Qin Yu was shaken by the treasure light that soared into the heavens. Luckily, he was already mentally prepared. He took several deep breaths and barely managed to compose himself. This was seen by Chief Steward Qin, and he revealed a smug smile. "My South Shy Nation has been established for 100,000 years and has been passed down for over 10 generations. It is the highest-level Blue Sea nation, and our treasury collects the world's most precious treasures. There are over 100,000 of them stored within." He turned. "Little friend Ning Qin, if there is anything you need, you can tell me. I am familiar with the treasury and can help you save some time." Qin Yu took a deep breath. "I'll have to trouble Chief Steward Qin. This junior would like to ask for some treasures that can increase one's talent." Chief Steward Qin's eyes flashed for a moment before returning to normal. Little friend Ning Qin's eyes are sharp. Whether it is in value or efficacy, these treasures are indeed top choices. Please follow me. Along the way, his eyes were actually stimulated by the light of treasures, divine lights, and all sorts of other lights. The Lord Steward stopped, turned around, and pointed. Each of these bubbles is specially refined to preserve the treasures within and lock in the medicinal energy so that it doesn't leak out. All right, little friend Ning Qin, please choose. Heaven Seizing Grass, 9 Nether Vine, Buddha Fruit, Good Fortune Nectar, Goblin. Sweeping his eyes over them, he could see that they were all top-grade treasures. Every single one of them could be tossed out and sold for a sky-high price. Qin Yu wished that he could pack up all of these treasures and take them away. At that time, he could eat one and throw one away. If he forcefully piled them up with quantity, he could become a cultivation genius. But this was only wishful thinking. If he really dared to mention it, then he would be crazy. He walked forwards and looked around. They were all good things, and he didn't want to miss out on any of them. Thus, Qin Yu soon discovered that there wasn't much to choose from. He turned and said, "Lord Chief Steward, how should this junior choose?" Chief Steward Qin smiled. "Whatever you like, just tell me." "Oh, then I asked Chief Steward Qin to help this junior obtain this 9 Nether Vine." Chief Steward Qin nodded. He took out a token and shook it. The 9 Nether Vine flew over along with the bubbles. "Little friend Ning, take the bubbles with you. When you need them, just break them." The Lord Chief Steward sighed. In order to seal these heavenly materials, the old ancestor specially ordered dozens of array grandmasters to create these bubbles. Just these bubbles alone are worth over 100,000 spirit stones. His words were telling Qin Yu just what the price of the items he chose were. "You brat, you need to know when to stop." Qin Yu had an enlightened expression. He carefully put away the 9 Nether Vine and pointed finger. "There's also this Buddha fruit." Chief Steward Qin's smile widened. He took the Buddha fruit. And also this, the 9 Heavens Thunder Essence Liquid. Chief Steward Qin didn't want to laugh anymore. As he watched Qin Yu put away the 3 bubbles into his storage ring, his heart began to bleed and twitch. "Cough, cough, little friend Ning Qin. Is there anything else you need?" In all honesty, this was purely a polite greeting. In Qin Wushang's opinion, Qin Yu choosing these 3 talent-enhancing treasures was already out of line. But the response he received caused his field of vision to darken. Qin Yu awkwardly smiled. This junior also wants to take a look at treasures that can strengthen the soul. I've lost too much of my lifespan, and I can't wait to enter the divine soul realm. A moment later, Chief Steward Qin cursed inwardly. "Didn't you say you wanted to take a look? You bastard. You still dare to choose? You actually dare to choose." He looked at Qin Yu and asked for a star essence soul, a sea soul flower, a god spirit grass, and a cloud turning fruit. If it weren't for the fact that the old ancestor had ordered him to satisfy any of Qin Yu's needs, Chief Steward Qin swore that he would have smashed this greedy little bastard to pieces. "It's only 100 years of lifespan, you bastard. Do you really think an inch of your life is worth an inch of gold? You bastard. This was just a joke. Taking a deep breath, Chief Steward Qin squeezed out a smile. Ning Qin, we should go. Qin looked up, a look of surprise on his face. That expression of complete and utter disbelief nearly caused Chief Steward Qin to explode with rage. Luckily, this brat seemed to understand that he couldn't go too far. He soon nodded. Chief Steward Qin turned and led the way. His footsteps were much faster than when he arrived. If he could, he wished he could grab Qin and throw him out. This bastard, what is he looking around for? Did he dare to open his mouth again? Did he really think he was made of mud? Cough, cough. Lord Chief Steward, please wait a moment. Chapter 350. After another hour passed, Chief Steward Qin walked out of the treasury in a daze. Everything that had happened just now replayed in his mind. He was flabbergasted at how he had managed to hold on and not tear Ning Qin to shreds. This bastard. He clenched his teeth. When Chief Steward Qin cursed out loud, he discovered that Qin Yu's figure had already vanished from sight. That bastard, where did Ning Qin go? Several subordinates panicked. This was the first time they had seen Chief Steward Qin angered to such an extent. They quickly replied that Ning Qin saw that the Lord's complexion wasn't good just now, so he took the initiative to leave. He ran quite fast. Chief Steward Qin rubbed his temples. He could feel blue veins popping up on his forehead. He quickly took a deep breath, afraid that his blood vessels would explode from his anger. Chief Steward Qin turned and left. He had to report this matter to the old ancestor. In the same pitch-black hall, a pale-faced Chief Steward Qin stepped into the transmission array. With a flash of light, he appeared deep within the underground palace. He knelt on the ground, gnashing his teeth. Old ancestor, this old servant just sent Ning Qin away. Within the 9 oil lamps, the South Shine Nation's old ancestor lightly said, "To anger you to such an extent, it seems Ning Qin's appetite is quite great." If it weren't for the old ancestor standing in front of him, Qin Wushang would have cursed out loud. This little bastard's actions couldn't just be described as having a great appetite. Forcefully suppressing his anger, Chief Steward Qin listed out all of Ning Qin's evil deeds. Old ancestor, Ning Qin took 3 treasures from the treasury to increase one's talent. They are, he took 4 treasures to strengthen the soul. They are, he took a set of rare spirit plant seeds. He took a supreme soul-protecting treasure. He took an ancient divine sword. Even someone as calm as the South Shine Nation's old ancestor couldn't help but widen his eyes halfway through. Anger and shock filled his face. Not to mention anything else, just that set of rare spirit plant seeds was something that the South Shine Nation had spent countless years to obtain. Some of them were already extinct in the land of divinity and demons. They were absolute rarities. There were even some that he had made in preparation for breaking into the Calamity immortal realm. But soon, these angry emotions vanished without a trace. The South Shine Nation's old ancestor had a thoughtful look on his face. He looked at Qin Wushang and said, "You want to remind me that Ning Qin has already sensed something?" Chief Steward Qin respectfully said, "This old servant doesn't dare to speak nonsense. It's just that Ning Qin's actions today were a bit excessive." The South Shine Nation's old ancestor nodded. "Not bad. These years of comfortable idleness haven't worn away your vigilance." Chief Steward Qin remained humble. "What does this old servant need to do?" The old ancestor smiled. "There is no need. For Ning Qin to comprehend so many pill recipes and even refine the incredibly potent revival good fortune pill, it wasn't strange for him to sense something. But what he knows is only the surface. Otherwise, how would he dare to offer a sacrifice to the good fortune tablet? His complexion became tranquil once more. Give it to him and satisfy all of Ning Qin's requests. Do you understand what I mean? Chief Steward Qin cowed out. This old servant understands. He got up and retreated. The uneasiness in his heart dissipated. Since the old ancestor was so calm, it meant that Ning Qin was clearly in control. Even if he used up all of these treasures, in the end they would still belong to the old ancestor. Qin Yu returned to his dwelling in the square building. He isolated himself with Ninth Province and sneered. Did you really think that what was yours, and what was mine was also yours? How naive. These things could be considered interest collected in advance for 100 years of his lifespan. The bigger part would come later. Qin Yu's eyes lit up with anticipation. He immediately went into seclusion. He was looking forward to the effects of these 3 top talent-enhancing treasures. He flipped his hand and took out a jade box. After opening it, a dark vine appeared. It seemed to contain an absolute low temperature, constantly emitting a bone-chilling chill. 9 nether vine. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pointed a finger at it. After fusing his aura into it, the 9 nether vine flew up and circled above his head. 12 hours later, there was a light popping sound, and the Buddha fruit above his head completely vanished. Qin Yu's eyelids trembled, and he slowly opened them. Without pausing, Qin Yu took out an essence chun pill and swallowed it. A moment later, he opened his eyes. There was a hint of joy in them, but they soon turned to helplessness. According to the test results of the 9-level Crystal Pagoda, Qin Yu's initial talent was at the 1st level. After using the Blue Jade Crystal Lotus and Nirvanic Lotus Seeds in the Tao Arena, he was at the peak of the 1st level. Then, after refining the 9 Nether Vine, 9 Heavens Thunder Essence Night, and the Buddha Fruit, Qin Yu's talent had just barely reached the 3rd level. In a land of divinity and demons, there was no value in raising anyone below the 4th level of talent. A 3rd level talent was nothing more than a pile of mud on the ground. But from Qin Yu's point of view, this was already an astonishing improvement. This was why he was so happy. But as he thought about how even an ordinary cultivator could become a rare cultivation genius by relying on these 3 treasures, Qin Yu couldn't help but bitterly smile. These were the most precious treasures of the South Shine Nation's treasury. If it weren't for the fact that he had caught the South Shine Nation's old ancestor, he wouldn't have had the slightest chance of obtaining them. It seemed that the road of increasing his talent was destined to be a long and arduous one. Qin Yu shook his head and suppressed these thoughts. He stood up and walked into the bathroom. After soaking in a comfortable hot spring bath, he changed into a clean white bathrobe. Standing in front of a mirror that occupied nearly half the wall, Qin Yu looked at his own gray and black hair. He frowned for a moment before composing himself. The world was fair. There were gains and losses. If he wanted to survive the world-killing tribulation, and if he wanted to obtain a greater good fortune and pave his future road to cultivation, he naturally had to pay a price. 100 years of his lifespan in exchange for his current situation. Of course, it seemed that 100 years wasn't enough. But this transaction was still worth it. Moreover, he had already chosen his path, so there was no need to worry about it. Besides making himself restless, there was no benefit. He put on the black robe. This robe, formed from the demon god armor, had an automatic cleaning function, saving him the trouble of changing clothes. Moreover, he could change the style to his heart's desire. Unfortunately, Qin Yu didn't like gaudy things and was very casual about what he wore, wasting this effect of the demon god armor. Qin Yu pushed open the door and sat down cross-legged. He organized the things he obtained from the South Shine Nation's treasury and decided not to continue refining them. Instead, he took out several pills and swallowed them. The world-killing tribulation would arrive soon. Even if he was confident that the South Shine Nation's old ancestor would protect him at all costs, that didn't mean he was foolproof. At this time, increasing his cultivation was the most important thing. Even if it was just a bit more strength, it might be able to save his life in a life or death situation. 5 days later, Qin Yu decided to refine pills again. This was because he didn't have much time left. Chief Steward Qin personally escorted him to the alchemy room. He earnestly said, "Ning Qin, what the old ancestor needs is the same revival good fortune pill as the first one. Do you understand?" Qin Yu nodded. "This junior understands. Chief Steward Qin, please rest assured." He strode into the alchemy room, a cold sneer on his face. Even if you don't want it, this young master still wants to obtain the good fortune tablet as soon as possible. The first time he refined the revival good fortune pill, because it sensed the aura of the world killing tribulation, it caused a change and caused it to absorb 100 years of his lifespan. If he wanted to refine another similar revival good fortune pill, it was impossible for him to do so by himself. He could only rely on the aura of the world killing tribulation once more. As for the little blue lamp, the foundation of the revival good fortune pill was Qin Yu's lifespan. No matter how heaven-defying it was still helpless. Luckily, Qin Yu had already expected this. Without accident, he should be able to duplicate the revival good fortune pill. He opened a furnace and began to refine the pill. This time, another pill recipe was activated in his mind, a fluctuation of consciousness. Then, Qin Yu took the initiative to give up control of his mortal body. In a situation where he was prepared, he tried his best to maintain a trace of clarity. Qin Yu discovered the current state of his mortal body and couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This good fortune tablet was truly terrifying. Just a wisp of consciousness was actually able to have such a great influence. But as he thought about how this good fortune tablet would soon belong to him, Qin Yu's mood brightened. The refining process went smoothly. When a revival good fortune pill flew out of 9th province, Qin Yu bit down on his fingertip. Ripples seemed to appear in his pitch-black eyes. He lifted his other hand and grasped upwards. The phantom of a great sun that had shrunk countless times appeared. In the depths of this sun phantom, there was a thumb-sized lantern. In the next moment, a horrifying aura arrived. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, and his face paled. The great sun phantom between his fingers trembled, as if it were withstanding an invisible pressure. With a loud cracking sound, it shattered. The revival good fortune pill emitted a shrill scream. The speed at which it plundered his lifespan rose. Qin Yu shivered, a trace of relief and fear crossing his heart. Relief was because his judgment was correct, and there was no problem with this revival good fortune pill. As for fear, it was because the heavenly tribulation's killing tribulation was already very, very close. Within 7 days, it would inevitably arrive. Moreover, Qin Yu had a faint intuition that if he summoned the little blue lamp phantom once more, the world-killing tribulation would directly arrive. Perhaps it was because he had the experience of having his lifespan crazily plundered before, or perhaps it was because his cultivation had risen to the 9th level of nascent soul, but his resistance had increased. Qin Yu didn't fall unconscious this time. Instead, he dragged his sweat-soaked body and opened the alchemy room doors. He met Qin Wushang's eyes and nodded. He saw a smile on his face, but it was actually a forced one. Chief Steward Qin thought he was feeling unwell and didn't think too much about it. He warmly said, "Someone, bring little friend Ning Qin to rest." Qin Yu waved his hand. "This junior can still persist, so let's first complete the sacrifice." Qin Wushang naturally didn't have any objections to this. He pretended to worry about Qin Yu's body, but after a moment of hesitation, he agreed. He clapped his hands, and the 4 expressionless guards that had been standing guard outside the cave suddenly appeared, carrying a soft sedan. "Little friend, please." Qin Yu smiled and nodded. He cursed these hypocrites inwardly. They had even prepared the sedan, and yet they were still pretending. As he thought, he had underestimated the thickness of these old fellows' skin. He needed to be more mentally prepared in the future. Without speaking, Qin Yu closed his eyes in meditation. When he opened them, he had arrived outside the black door. Wei Ziqing was waiting here. He took out a token and opened the door. Then he said to Qin Yu, "Little friend, you were able to refine 2 revival good fortune pills in such a short period of time. That is truly admirable." Behind him were 2 people, White Feng Feng and Black Bei Bei. Seeing Qin Yu look at them, Wei Ziqing smiled and explained, "Little friend Black has just completed the sacrifice. He is a good young man." Qin Yu relaxed a little. It seemed that this girl, White Feng Feng, hadn't completed the refinement yet. He should find a chance to remind her. As for Black Bei Bei, he could only rely on his luck in the future. Qin Yu smiled at White Feng Feng. "Wait a moment. Come to my residence." There are some things I need to talk to you about. There was no need to avoid it too much. After all, it wasn't a secret that the two of them were relatively close. White Foam looked at his head. His hair had already turned completely gray and her eyes reddened. She quickly nodded. Without further delay, Chief Steward Qin led Qin Yu in. Even Wei Ziqing stayed outside on his own initiative. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.